Gatefall Station hung in the void like a jeweled collar choked tight around the throat of the Earth. From the viewing deck of an approaching freighter, the orbital platform was a blinding, chaotic masterpiece of engineering. A sprawling lattice of docking arms, habitation rings, and industrial refineries that glittered against the velvet black of space. Below it, the planet turned in slow, silent majesty, its night side webbed with the amber bioluminescence of cities that never slept. Thousands of ships, ranging from sleek diplomatic couriers to battered ore haulers, moved in a synchronized swarm around the station, guided by the invisible hands of traffic control beams and the desperate commerce of a galaxy trying to forget it had recently been on fire. In the humid, pressurized bowels of Docking Bay 94, Jace turned a hydrospanner with enough torque to strip a bolt, his knuckles white and scarred. Sweat dripped from the tip of his nose, sizzling as it hit the hot casing of a jump drive that had not been serviced in a decade. The air here did not smell like the recycled lavender and ozone of the upper promenade. It smelled of burning lubricant, unwashed flight suits, and the metallic tang of ionizing radiation. "Pass me the fusion welder," Jace grunted, not looking up from the tangled mess of wires. His apprentice, a lanky kid named Kale who had never seen a gravity well deeper than a swimming pool, fumbled with the tool before slapping it into Jace's grease-stained palm. "You are going to strip the coupling if you keep forcing it," Kale said, leaning against the hull of the freighter. "You are angry today, boss, more than usual." "I am not angry," Jace muttered, igniting the welder with a snap of his wrist. "I am focused. There is a difference." There was no difference, and they both knew it. Jace worked with the frantic intensity of a man trying to outrun his own thoughts. He was 35 years old, but his eyes were ancient, rimmed with the gray shadows of insomnia. A jagged scar ran from his left temple down into his beard, a souvenir from the siege of Antioch, a battle where the sky had rained fire for 3 weeks straight. A sudden shriek of metal from a nearby docking clamp echoed through the bay, sounding exactly like the incoming whine of a suborbital bomber. Jace froze. The welder slipped from his hand, clattering to the deck. In a split second, the docking bay vanished. He was back in the mud of Antioch. The sky was bleeding violet light. The air tasted of ash and vaporized copper. He could hear the screaming of his squad over the comms, orders dissolving into static as the Aurelian beam ships crested the horizon, beautiful and terrible, turning the world to glass. "Boss?" The voice was distant, underwater. "Jace!" he snapped back, gasping for air, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Kale was staring at him, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and pity. Jace hated the pity more than the flashbacks. He snatched the welder up from the floor, his hands shaking before he forced them still. "I am fine," Jace snapped, his voice raspy. "Just a pressure headache. Get back to work." Kale hesitated but turned back to his console. Jace wiped the cold sweat from his forehead with the back of his sleeve. He looked up at the flickering holographic news feed projected on the far wall of the hangar. The image was grainy, but the face on the screen was flawless. It was a broadcast from the upper levels, a royal procession, a voiceover, smooth and manufactured, filled the bay. "Today marks a new dawn for the Galactic Alliance. We welcome Her Royal Highness, Princess Liriana of the Aurelian Empire, as she arrives to finalize the historic Treaty of Three Worlds." Jace stared at the screen. The camera panned over a creature of impossible elegance stepping off a crystalline cruiser. She was tall, slender, and terrifyingly beautiful. Her skin was a pale violet hue, marked with bioluminescent patterns that shimmered like stardust. She wore armor that looked like poured liquid silver, and on her head sat a crown that was not metal, but a halo of suspended hard light. To everyone else in the bay, she looked like salvation. To Jace, she looked like the enemy. He spat on the deck, turned his back on the screen, and went back to fixing the engine of a garbage scow. 200 levels above, the air smelled of synthetic jasmine and fear. Princess Liriana of Aurelian walked down the ramp of the Ether's Pride, her movements fluid and practiced. She kept her chin high, her expression serene, a mask of porcelain perfection that she had been trained to wear since she was a child. The crowds lining the promenade cheered, a roar of sound that vibrated through the floorboards. But Liriana heard more than just the noise. She felt them. Her telepathic sensitivity, a trait of the royal bloodline, was currently dampened by the dampeners woven into her crown, but it was not silenced. The emotions of the crowd washed over her like a tidal wave of static. She felt their desperate hope, their awe. But beneath it all, she felt a jagged undercurrent of suspicion. They looked at her and saw a goddess, but they also saw the daughter of the warlords who had burned their colonies. She felt like a trophy being paraded before a conquered people. "You are doing well," a voice whispered in her ear. Counselor Voren walked a half-step behind her, close enough to guide her but far enough to let the cameras capture her isolation. Voren was an elder of the High Court, his skin gray and deeply lined, his eyes like polished obsidian. He projected a mental wall so thick Liriana could never sense his true thoughts, only the cold projection of his ambition. "I feel like a prize grox at a market auction," Liriana murmured, barely moving her lips, maintaining her benevolent smile for the hovering press drones. "You are the keystone of peace," Voren corrected, his tone sharp. "Do not slouch. Your Highness, the Earth delegation is watching. If you look weak, the treaty fails. If the treaty fails, the fleet bombardment resumes. Do not let your mind wander." Liriana straightened her spine, the liquid silver of her ceremonial armor shifting with her movement. She wanted to scream. She wanted to rip the crown of light from her head and throw it into the recycling vents. She was 20 years old in Earth standard years, and she had never made a single choice for herself. Her life was a series of corridors, leading from one diplomatic cage to another. They reached the end of the promenade where the Earth delegation waited. The Prime Minister, a weary woman with iron-gray hair, stepped forward with an extended hand. "Welcome to Gatefall, Your Highness," the Prime Minister said. Liriana took the hand. It was warm, dry, and trembling slightly. Liriana sensed the woman's terror, not of Liriana, but of failing. "We are honored to be here," Liriana said, her voice melodic and amplified by the translators. "We come in the spirit of unity." It was a lie. She had come because she had been ordered to marry a warlord prince she had never met, a man named Draven who commanded the Iron Fleets, to seal a pact that felt fragile as glass. The delegation moved into a secure briefing room, the heavy blast doors hissing shut behind them, cutting off the noise of the crowd. The silence was suffocating. The room was dominated by a large tactical table displaying the sector. Red and blue zones interlocked like the teeth of a trap. The briefing was tense. An Earth general with a prosthetic eye pointed to a cluster of asteroids near the station. "We have picked up chatter from the Iron Dawn extremists," the general said. "They do not want this wedding to happen. They believe Aurelian is surrendering its dominance by allying with humans. They have threatened to disrupt the ceremony." "Let them try," Voren said dismissively, smoothing his robes. "The princess is under the protection of the royal guard. Our technology is centuries ahead of your fragmented rebel groups." "It is not just rebels," the general countered. "We have reports of sympathizers within your own ranks." Voren's eyes narrowed. "Be careful with your accusations, human." Liriana sat at the edge of the table, her hands folded in her lap. She felt the spike of aggression in the room, sharp and metallic. She closed her eyes for a second, trying to find a quiet space in her own mind, but there was none. She was the trigger for a war, a piece of political geometry. "If I may," Liriana said softly. The room went silent. "If the Iron Dawn attacks," she said, looking at the map, "they will not strike the fleet. They will strike at the symbol. They will strike at me. Perhaps we should minimize public exposure." Vorin placed a hand on her shoulder. It felt heavy, like a shackle. "Nonsense," Vorin said, his voice dripping with condescending sweetness. "Hiding would show fear. You will walk the procession as planned. You will be perfect. Liriana, you will be the light of the Empire. We did not bring you here to cower in a bunker." Liriana looked up at him, and for a fleeting second, she saw a crack in his mental wall, a flash of cold, calculating anticipation. It vanished before she could read it. "Of course. Counselor," she said, lowering her gaze, "I exist to serve." 2 hours later, Jace was cursing at a drone. He was walking through the mid-level transport corridors, a chaotic arterial vein of the station that connected the diplomatic spires to the industrial underbelly. The drone, a spherical maintenance unit designed to weld hull plates, was hovering erratically over his shoulder, beeping a mournful, glitching tune. "Stupid piece of junk," Jace grumbled, smacking the side of the drone with his palm. "Fly straight or I will turn you into a toaster." The drone buzzed a defiant negative and dipped low, nearly taking off the ear of a passing Tellarite merchant. Jace sighed. He had been ordered to take the unit up to the Royal Docking Bay for a priority inspection of the Aurelian cruiser's external atmosphere scrubbers. Apparently, the royal lungs were too delicate for standard station air. He needed the hazard pay, credits were tight, and he owed a significant bar tab at the layout on level 6. But the thought of being near the Aurelian ship made his skin crawl. He pushed through the crowd, his broad shoulders clearing a path. The mid-level market was a sensory assault. Stalls selling fermented Venusian eel stew smoked next to booths hawking contraband cybernetics. Holographic dancers gyrated on podiums, and the air was thick with the babble of 50 different languages. It was loud, dirty, and alive. Jace preferred it to the sterile silence of the upper decks. Here, nobody cared about the war. They only cared about the next meal and the next deal. Liriana needed to breathe. She had managed to slip away during the shift change of her personal guard. It had been terrifyingly easy, which should have worried her, but she was too intoxicated by the adrenaline to care. She had discarded the heavy silver armor, leaving it on its stand to mimic her silhouette, and donned a rough technician's tunic she had swiped from a laundry cart. She had wrapped a heavy gray cloak around her shoulders and pulled the hood deep over her face to hide the glowing constellations on her skin and the unmistakable violet of her eyes. She moved through the market district, her heart racing. It was overwhelming. The smells hit her first, spices that burned her nose, the scent of unwashed bodies, the ozone of frying electronics. The colors were violent and clashing, neon pinks and toxic greens. She felt the emotions of the people around her, not as a distant ocean, but as a rainstorm. A mother worrying about rent, a thief scanning for a mark, a pair of lovers arguing in a corner. It was chaotic and messy and wonderfully real. She was so busy staring at a stall selling singing crystals that she did not see the large man turning the corner with a floating metal sphere. She turned, stepping right into his path. They collided hard. Liriana gasped as the impact knocked the wind out of her. She stumbled back, her boots catching on a loose grate. "Whoa." "Easy there," a deep voice grumbled. A hand shot out, rough, calloused and strong, and caught her by the wrist. The grip was firm, stabilizing her before she could hit the deck. Jace looked down at the person he had just run over. Small frame, gray cloak, clearly a tourist who did not know how to walk in a station corridor. "Watch where you are going," Jace said, pulling her upright. "The gravity plating is tricky in this sec." Liriana looked up, startled by the contact. The sudden motion caused her hood to slip back. For a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze in the crowded corridor. Jace stared. He saw the face from the news feeds, but without the filter of distance. He saw the pale violet skin, the intricate glowing geometric patterns tracing her cheekbones, and eyes that held the luminosity of a dying star. He recognized the markings. He had seen them on the soldiers who had burned his unit. Enemy. Liriana saw a human male with grease streaks on his face and eyes that shifted instantly from annoyance to a dangerous, predatory recognition. She saw the scar on his temple and felt the sudden, jagged spike of trauma and aggression radiating from his mind like a physical blow. "You," Jace breathed, his voice dropping to a growl. Liriana yanked her hood back up, panic flaring. I am sorry, I must go." She tried to pull her wrist free, but Jace's grip tightened instinctively. "Wait a minute," he said. "You are the..." The world exploded. It did not start with a sound, but with a pressure wave that slammed them both sideways. A storefront 10 meters away erupted in a fireball of shattering glass and twisted metal. The roar followed a split second later, a deafening crack that buckled the deck plates. Screams tore through the air. The market dissolved into panic. Jace was thrown against a bulkhead, his ears ringing. He hit the ground hard, tasting blood. His combat instincts, drilled into him through years of hell, overrode the shock. He rolled onto his stomach, scanning the threat. 3 figures had emerged from the smoke of the explosion. They were not security. They wore mishmash armor, scavenged from different militaries, and their faces were hidden behind ornate, terrifying masks made of polished brass and bone. They carried weapons that looked cobbled together, energy rifles with unstable, crackling power cells. One of the masked figures pointed a jagged blade toward the center of the chaos. "There!" the figure shouted, the voice distorted by a modulator. "Secure the target. Take the princess." Jace looked to his left. Liriana was sprawled on the deck, coughing in the acrid smoke. She looked frozen, her eyes wide with terror, staring at the approaching gunman. Jace looked at the exit. He could run. He should run. She was Aurelian. She was the reason he had nightmares. He looked at the gunmen. They raised their weapons. "Damn it!" Jace snarled. He lunged forward, not away from the danger, but toward it. He grabbed Liriana by the back of her technician's tunic and hauled her behind a heavy plasteel crate just as a bolt of plasma scorched the air where she had been standing. "Stay down!" Jace barked, his voice cutting through her panic. Liriana looked at him, confused. You are helping me?" "Shut up," Jace said. He peered over the crate. The 3 attackers were advancing, firing wildly into the crowd to clear a path. They were professionals, moving with tactical precision. Jace had no gun. He had a hydrospanner, a fusion welder, and a glitchy drone. He looked at the drone, which was hovering confusedly above the crate, beeping in alarm. "Override command," Jace shouted at the drone. "Protocol Delta 9. Target hostile signatures. Ramming speed." The drone chirped a query. "Just hit the guy in the mask," Jace screamed. He grabbed a heavy metal toolbox from his belt, spun, and hurled it with the precision of a major league pitcher. The toolbox sailed through the smoke and connected with a sickening crunch against the helmet of the lead attacker. The man staggered back, his aim ruined. In the same second, the maintenance drone shrieked and dive-bombed the second attacker, slamming into his chest with enough force to knock him flat. Jace grabbed Liriana's arm. "Move!" They scrambled from cover, sprinting down a side alleyway that smelled of rotting hydroponics. Laser fire chewed up the wall behind them. "They are blocking the main lifts," Jace yelled over the din. "We are cut off." Liriana was struggling to keep up, her boots slipping on the slick floor. "I can sense them," she gasped, her voice tight with strain. "Their minds, they are cold, empty, like machines." Jace dragged her around a corner, dead-ending in a maintenance alcove. He slammed his hand against the control panel for the service door, but the light stayed red. "Locked," he swore, kicking the door. "They have jammed the local net." Footsteps thundered around the corner behind them. The two remaining attackers appeared, weapons raised. There was no cover, nowhere to go. "End of the line! Human!" the lead attacker hissed, raising a rifle that pulsed with unstable green energy. "Step away from the asset." Jace stood in front of Liriana, shielding her with his body. He raised his fusion welder, a pathetic defense against a plasma rifle. But he held his ground. He would not die on his knees. Liriana looked at Jace's back. She saw the tension in his muscles, the reckless courage of a man defending an enemy he hated. Something inside her snapped. The fear evaporated, replaced by a surge of royal indignation and raw power. She stepped out from behind Jace. "Get down," Jace warned, not looking back. Liriana extended her hand, palm open. Her eyes flared with blinding white light. The constellations on her skin burned through the fabric of her disguise. "Enough." She did not speak the word. She pushed it into the world. A pulse of psychic force erupted from her palm. It was not a physical wind, but a distortion of reality. The air buckled. The sound waves in the corridor were seized and amplified into a physical hammer. The overhead lights shattered in a cascading wave of sparks. The two attackers were lifted off their feet as if hit by a freight train, thrown backward 20 feet to slam violently into the far wall. Their weapons clattered to the floor. Useless. Silence rushed back into the corridor, heavy and ringing. Jace lowered his welder slowly. He turned to look at Liriana. She was breathing hard, the glow on her skin fading to a dull pulse. She looked terrified of what she had just done. "And what the hell was that?" Jace asked, his eyes wide. Liriana stared at her own hands. I did not mean to. I just wanted them to stop." Jace looked at the unconscious assassins, then back at the slight woman in the oversized cloak. He realized then that the propaganda posters were wrong. She was not just a symbol. She was a weapon. The comms unit on Jace's belt crackled with static, but no clear signal came through. The jammers were still active. "We cannot stay here," Jace said, the soldier in him taking over. "Security is compromised." Those guys had station schematics and military-grade jammers. "If we wait for the cops, we are dead." Liriana looked at him, trembling. "Where do we go?" Jace walked over to a heavy grate in the floor, marked with a biohazard warning. He leveraged it open with his spanner, revealing a dark, steaming tunnel that dropped into the station's guts. "The service shafts," Jace said, looking up at her. "It is a rat maze. I know every turn. They won't be able to track us down there." He offered her a hand. It was grease-stained and scarred. "Come on, Your Highness," he said, a ghost of a grin touching his lips. "You can tell your people I kidnapped you later." Liriana hesitated. She looked at the dark hole, then at the unconscious killers, and finally at the human mechanic who had stood between her and death. She reached out and took his hand. "Lead the way," she whispered. They dropped into the darkness just as the corridor filled with the heavy thrum of reinforcements. Far below, in the cramped, humid darkness of the ventilation shaft, Jace and Liriana crawled over pipes slick with condensation. Sparks rained down from a severed cable above, illuminating their faces in brief, strobe-like flashes. Jace took the lead, moving with practiced ease, while Liriana struggled to keep her footing, her ceremonial instincts useless in the grime. "Keep your head down," Jace whispered. "We need to get 3 levels down before we can cut across to the engineering sector." As they disappeared into the shadows of the station's underbelly, a figure stepped out of the smoke in the corridor above. The attacker who had been hit by the toolbox adjusted his cracked mask. He tapped a calm, coded rhythm into a wrist communicator. "Target is loose with a human," the attacker said, his voice devoid of pain or panic. "A mechanic. Local." There was a pause, and then a cold voice responded in his ear. "Initiate contingency plan. Burn them out." The descent into the bowels of Gatefall Station was not a journey measured in distance, but in degradation. The air grew heavier with every ladder they descended, thickening from the recycled sterility of the diplomatic decks into a soup of hydraulic fluid, stale ozone, and the copper tang of old blood. The service shafts were narrow, designed for maintenance drones and the occasional desperate technician, not for a luminous alien princess in ceremonial armor. Jace moved with the fluid, aggressive grace of a man who knew exactly how much space his body occupied. He slid down vertical railings and vaulted over steaming pressure pipes without breaking his stride. Liriana, however, was struggling. Her silver greaves clanged against the metal grating with every step, a cacophony that echoed through the dark tunnels like a dinner bell for any pursuing assassin. "Keep it down," Jace hissed, not looking back. "You are making more noise than a dropped toolbox." "I am trying," Liriana snapped back, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. These boots were designed for throne rooms, not for crawling through. "What is this substance?" "It is grease. Your radiance," Jace said, dropping 10 feet to a lower catwalk. "Do not eat it." He stopped at a junction box, a cramped hexagonal space where 4 main arterial conduits met in a tangle of wires and hissing steam valves. A single strip of fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting a stroboscopic pallor on the rust-streaked walls. Jace spun the locking wheel on the hatch they had just come through, sealing it with a heavy thud. He turned to face her, and the exhaustion on his face was replaced by a hard, interrogating glare. "We are safe for a minute," Jace said, crossing his arms over his chest. "Now you are going to tell me what is going on." Liriana leaned against the wall, trying to catch her breath. The exertion had caused her bioluminescence to flare, and in the dim light of the junction she looked like a galaxy confined in human shape. The constellations on her cheeks pulsed with a rapid, violet rhythm. "I told you," she said, avoiding his eyes. "They were trying to kill me. I gathered that part," Jace said, stepping closer. His voice was low and dangerous. Those were not common thugs. They had military-grade shield disruptors and Aurelian energy signatures on their rifles. "And you," he gestured vaguely at her glowing form. "You just casually rewrote the laws of physics back there with your mind. So stop playing the confused tourist. Who are you?" Liriana looked at him. She saw the grime on his face, the grease under his fingernails, and the hard, unyielding set of his jaw. She realized that lying would only get her left behind in this metal labyrinth. "I am Liriana," she said softly. Jace stared at her. The name hung in the damp air between them. He blinked, processing the information, and then let out a short, bitter laugh that had no humor in it. "Liriana," he repeated, as in Princess Liriana, the Aurelian heir, the one on all the posters upstairs. "Yes," she said. Jace ran a hand over his face, smearing soot across his forehead. He turned away from her, pacing the 3 steps the small room allowed, and kicked a loose bolt across the floor. Unbelievable, he muttered. Of all the people on this station, I have to save the poster girl for the empire that turned my hometown into a glass parking lot. He spun back to her, his eyes blazing with a sudden, intense anger. Do you know how many friends I buried because of your family? Do you have any idea what your ships did to the Outer Rim colonies? Liriana stiffened, her regal training kicking in despite the dirt on her cloak. I was a child when the war ended, she said, her voice steady but cool. I did not command the fleets. I am here to sign a treaty to ensure it never happens again. A treaty, Jace scoffed. A piece of paper signed by liars in a ballroom while people down here starve. You think marrying some warlord is going to fix what your people broke? It is my duty, Liriana shot back, her own temper flaring. Her skin brightened, casting purple shadows against the rust. And do not lecture me on sacrifice, human. You fix engines. I am being sold like livestock to a man I have never met to keep your planet from being incinerated. So forgive me if I do not apologize for my family history while I am currently running for my life. Jace stared at her. He had expected her to cry, or to command him. He had not expected her to bite back. He looked at her standing there, ridiculous in her finery amidst the squalor, trying to maintain her dignity while dripping with condensation. The anger in his chest did not vanish, but it shifted, cooling into a grudging, cynical respect. Fine, Jace said. He unclipped a multi-tool from his belt. But if you want to survive the next hour, your radiance, we have to do something about that flashlight you are wearing. He pointed at her armor. You are glowing like a beacon, he said. And that armor clanks. We need to get you to my workshop. But to get there, we have to cross Sector 4. It is a market zone. If you walk through there looking like the hood ornament of a royal cruiser, we will be dead in 30 seconds. Liriana looked down at her silver breastplate. I cannot remove it. It requires a ceremonial key. Jace rolled his eyes, or a hydro spanner and some patience. Come here. He beckoned her into a smaller side alcove, a utility closet filled with mops and buckets. It was cleaner than the junction, but barely. Turn around, he ordered. Liriana hesitated, then turned her back to him. She felt his hands on her shoulders, heavy and warm. She flinched. In the palace, no one touched her. Her handmaidens used silk gloves. The healers used diagnostic wands. Physical contact was a breach of protocol, a violation of the sacred distance between the crown and the common. Relax, Jace muttered. I am not going to hurt you. He began to work on the complex clasps of her armor. The mechanism was foreign, a series of magnetic locks and physical latches, but Jace was a mechanic. He understood how things fit together. As he worked, his knuckles brushed against the nape of her neck. Liriana gasped softly. Her skin, where he touched her, flared with a brilliant, intense white light, swirling into the violet. It was an involuntary reaction, a biological feedback loop caused by the proximity of another living nervous system. Jace pulled his hands back as if burned. Whoa, he said. You okay? It is sensitive, Liriana whispered, her voice trembling. My species. We are telepathically resonant. Touch is, loud. Jace looked at his hands, then at the glowing skin of her neck. He paused, his expression softening. I will be careful, he said, his voice dropping an octave, losing its sarcastic edge. He resumed his work, but his movements were gentler now. He unlatched the heavy silver pauldrons, then the backplate. Piece by piece, the ceremonial armor fell away, revealing the simple, shimmering bodysuit she wore beneath. With every layer removed, Liriana felt lighter, physically and spiritually. The armor had been a weight she had carried for weeks, a physical manifestation of the expectations placed upon her. Without it, she felt dangerously exposed, yet strangely free. Jace took off his own heavy canvas jacket. It was stained with oil and smelled of engine grease and tobacco, but it was thick and warm. "Put this on," he said, handing it to her. "And these." He pulled a pair of spare coveralls from a locker in the alcove. They were 3 sizes too big for her. Liriana struggled into the clothes. The coveralls swallowed her slender frame. She had to roll the cuffs of the sleeves up 4 times. When she put on Jace's jacket, the hem came down to her knees. She looked at Jace, waiting for his mockery. Jace looked her up and down. She looked like a child playing dress-up in her father's work clothes, her luminous eyes peering out from under the collar. "You look ridiculous," he said, but he was smiling. "It smells like burning chemicals," Liriana noted, sniffing the sleeve. "That is the smell of honest work," Jace said. "Try it sometime. Here." He tossed her a pair of heavy magnetic boots. Her delicate ceremonial slippers were discarded in the corner. She shoved her feet into the boots and took a step, nearly tripping over her own ankles as the magnets engaged with the deck plating. She stumbled forward, flailing. Jace caught her by the elbow, steadying her again. "Lift your feet," he instructed. "Do not shuffle. You have to walk like you own the ground, not like you are floating over it." "I am trying," she grumbled, taking another clunky step and banging her shoulder into the doorframe. "This is barbaric. How do you people move with all this weight?" "Gravity is a harsh mistress," Jace said, opening the door. "Keep the hood up. Keep your head down. And for the love of God, do not glow at anyone." Sector 4 was a riot of life. It was the unofficial market of the lower decks, a place where the station's janitors, mechanics, and illegal salvage operators came to trade, eat, and forget that they lived in a tin can floating in a vacuum. Liriana walked close to Jace, clutching the sleeve of his jacket. Her eyes were wide behind the tinted visor he had found for her. She had never seen anything like this. The royal promenade was silent, clean, and gold. This place was a sensory explosion. She saw children of 3 different species chasing a malfunctioning cleaning drone, shrieking with laughter. She saw a 4-armed bartender mixing drinks that smoked and hissed. She saw a human woman shouting at a Tellarite vendor about the price of synthetic tubers, their argument punctuated by wild hand gestures and laughter. "It is so loud," Liriana whispered. "It is alive," Jace corrected. They passed a stall selling recycled tech components. A group of teenagers were gathered around a holographic game, cheering as one of them scored a point. Liriana stopped, mesmerized. "What are they doing?" she asked. "Just wasting time," Jace said, urging her forward. "Come on, and we need to keep moving," but she was dragging her feet, captivated. "Look at them," she said. "They are not afraid." "Why would they be?" Jace asked. "Because the galaxy is ending," she said simply. "Or at least, that is what the diplomats say. Down here, the galaxy ends every Tuesday," Jace said. "You get used to it." His stomach gave a loud, treacherous growl. He realized he hadn't eaten since the shift began. He looked at Liriana, who was eyeing a food stall with a mixture of horror and fascination. "Hungry?" he asked. "I do not know," she admitted. "My meals are nutrient-balanced pastes prepared by the royal dietitians." Jace snorted. "That sounds miserable. Come here." He pulled her over to a stall run by an old woman with cybernetic eyes. The smell coming from the grill was pungent and spicy, stinging the eyes in a pleasant way. "2 fire sticks," Jace ordered, slapping a credit chip on the counter. "Extra heat." The woman handed over 2 skewers of grilled meat, origin unknown, drenched in a glowing red sauce. Jace handed one to Liriana. What is it? She asked, inspecting the skewer suspiciously. Do not ask, Jace advised. Just eat. She took a hesitant bite. The reaction was immediate. Her eyes widened. She gasped, and then she began to cough violently. Her bioluminescence flared bright orange, then a chaotic yellow, flashing like a strobe light under the oversized jacket. Water, she wheezed, her hand grasping at her throat. It burns. Jace laughed, a genuine, rusty sound that felt strange in his chest. He pounded her on the back. It is supposed to burn, he said, grinning. That is the flavor. Liriana glared at him through watering eyes, taking another smaller bite. You poisoned me, she accused, though she did not stop eating. It is called spice. Your radiance. It wakes you up. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, leaving a smear of red sauce on her cheek. She looked at the skewer, then at Jace, and a small, tentative smile broke through her composure. It is vigorous, she decided. Jace watched her eat, seeing the Princess of Aurelian, the symbol of the enemy, standing in a dirty market eating street meat with sauce on her face. Did something to the knot of anger in his gut. It loosened it. Just a fraction. She was not a symbol. She was just a girl who had never tasted pepper. Jace's workshop was hidden behind a false panel in a disused ventilation plant on level 9. It was a space he had carved out for himself, a sanctuary of clutter and quiet. The room was filled with half-finished projects, disassembled drone motors, antique combustion engines, and stacks of data pads. In the corner, a small cot was pushed against the wall, and above it, a shelf held a few dusty medals and a faded photograph of a squad of soldiers standing in front of a dropship, their arms around each other, laughing. Liriana stepped inside, looking around with curiosity. It was small, cramped, and messy, the opposite of her palace suite. Yet, it felt warm. Home, sweet home, Jace said, locking the heavy blast door behind them and engaging the jammer he had rigged to the perimeter. He moved to his primary workbench, sweeping a pile of gears onto the floor to make space. Sit, he commanded. Liriana sat on a swivel stool, spinning slightly. Jace plugged the device he had taken from the assassin, a sleek, black data spike, into his console. He also gestured for her communicator. Let me see your comms unit. She handed him the delicate crystalline device. Jace connected it to his system, his fingers flying across the holographic keyboard. Screens popped up, scrolling streams of code. His expression darkened as he read the data. This is not good, he muttered. What is it? Liriana asked, rolling her chair closer. Jace pointed at a string of red text. Your communicator. It has a passive tracker embedded in the encryption layer. It is broadcasting your location on a sub-frequency. Liriana went pale. But Vorin gave me this communicator. He said it was secure. Then Vorin is either an idiot or he is working with the people who want you dead, Jace said bluntly. He turned his attention to the assassin's data spike. He cracked the encryption with a brute force algorithm he had written during the war. The file opened, spilling images and text across the screen. It was a dossier. There were maps of the treaty signing ceremony, security rotations, and a list of targets. Target 1, Prime Minister Cato. Target 2, Princess Liriana. Operation Dawnfall. Jace scrolled down. There was a timestamp. It matched the exact moment the treaty was scheduled to be signed. Operation Dawnfall. Jace read. They are not just trying to kill you, Liriana. They are trying to stage a massacre. Look at this. He highlighted a section of the plan. Asset elimination to be attributed to Earth radical elements. Justification for fleet mobilization. They are going to kill you and blame us, Jace said, his voice cold. It is a false flag. If you die on Earth soil or on an Earth station, your warlord fiancé has the excuse he needs to wipe us out. Liriana stared at the screen, her glow dimming to a faint, ghostly gray. It is Voron, she whispered. He told me the Iron Dawn was a threat, but he is using them. He is orchestrating this. Why? Jace asked. Why sabotage the peace? Because peace is bad for business, Liriana said, bitter agony in her voice. And because the hardliners in the High Court believe that allying with humans dilutes our purity, Voron has always hated this treaty. He sees me as a weakness. She stood up, pacing the small room, her heavy boots clumping on the floor. I am not a person to them. I am a fuse. They light me, I burn, and the explosion starts the war they want. She stopped in front of Jace's shelf, looking at the old photograph. Who are they? She asked softly. Jace looked up from the screen. His eyes were tired. My squad, the 44th Drop Troops. Where are they now? Dead, Jace said. All of them. Antioch. Liriana turned to look at him. The silence in the room was heavy, filled with the ghosts of a war that had never really ended for either of them. I am sorry, she said. Do not apologize, Jace said, standing up and rubbing the back of his neck. Just stay alive. That is the only way to beat them. Hours passed. The station's alert level remained at critical, sirens wailing faintly in the distance like mourning beasts. They were trapped. To leave now was suicide. They ate rations from Jace's emergency stockpile, dry crackers and protein gel that tasted like wet cardboard. They sat on the floor of the workshop, the console lights casting long shadows across their faces. They talked. At first it was tactical, planning routes, discussing security codes. But as the night deepened, the conversation drifted. Jace talked about the silence of space after a battle, how he missed the sound of rain on a tin roof. Liriana talked about the crystal forests of Aurelian, how they sang when the wind blew, and how she had never been allowed to walk in them alone. I have never been alone, she confessed, pulling her knees to her chest. There are always guards, handlers, drones. Even when I sleep, the biomonitors watch my heart rate. That sounds like prison, Jace said. It is, she said, a beautiful golden prison. She looked at Jace. You fought us, you hated us. Did you ever wonder who you were fighting? I thought I was fighting monsters, Jace admitted. Faceless, glowing monsters who wanted to take my home. And now? Jace looked at her. She was wearing his greasy jacket. Her hair was messy, and she had a smear of spicy sauce on her chin. She looked human. Now, Jace said, his voice rough, I think I am just fighting for a girl who likes spicy food. Liriana's markings flickered, a soft, warm pink. She scooted closer to him. The air in the workshop felt suddenly charged, the distance between them shrinking. I do not want to go back, she whispered. Not to Voron, not to the treaty, not to the prince. You have to, Jace said, though the words tasted like ash. You are the only one who can stop this. I know, she said, but for tonight. She reached out and took his hand. Her skin was warm, and the contact sent a jolt through Jace's arm that had nothing to do with bioelectricity and everything to do with the way she was looking at him. Just one night, she begged, her voice barely audible. Pretend I am not a princess. Pretend there is no war. Just let me be someone in your arms. Jace looked at her. Every instinct he had screamed that this was a bad idea. She was royalty. He was a grease monkey. She was Aurelian. He was Earth. This could get him executed. But looking into her violet eyes, seeing the raw, naked vulnerability there, He found that he did not care. He reached up and gently cupped her face. His thumb traced the glowing line of a constellation on her cheekbone. "Okay," he whispered, "just one night." He leaned in, and she met him halfway. The kiss was tentative at first, a question asked and answered. But then Liriana made a small, desperate sound in her throat, and Jace's control snapped. He pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her, burying his hands in her hair. It was a kiss fueled by adrenaline and fear and a sudden, overwhelming need to connect with another living soul before the universe tore them apart. It was messy and desperate and perfect. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Jace steered her toward the narrow bunk in the corner. "We need to sleep," he said, his voice husky. They lay down on the cot, fully clothed. It was a tight fit. Liriana curled up against his chest, her head resting in the hollow of his shoulder. Jace wrapped his arm around her, pulling the heavy wool blanket over them both. She felt small in his arms, fragile despite her power. "Jace," she whispered into the darkness. "Yeah? Thank you." He didn't answer. He just tightened his hold on her. For the first time in years, the nightmares of Antioch felt far away. The steady rhythm of her breathing against his ribs was a lullaby he hadn't known he needed. Liriana closed her eyes, feeling a sense of safety she had never known in her crystal palace. Here, in a mechanic's shop that smelled of oil and ozone, she was not a symbol. She was just Liriana. Slowly, exhaustion claimed them. Jace fell asleep with his chin resting on the top of her head. Liriana slept with her hand clutching his shirt. Her bioluminescent markings slowed their pulsing, synchronizing with the beat of Jace's heart, tracing faint, peaceful constellations across both their skins in the dark. In the far corner of the ceiling, hidden behind a vent grate, a small red light blinked on, a microscopic lens word, focusing on the sleeping couple. It recorded the intimacy, the forbidden touch, the scandalous union of Earth and Aurelian, silent, impartial, and damning. The camera continued to stream, sending the footage directly to a secure server encrypted with Counselor Voron's personal code. The pale, watery light of an artificial dawn filtered through the grime-streaked porthole of the workshop, painting the cluttered floor in shades of gray and steel. The station was waking up, the distant thrum of atmospheric recyclers vibrating through the deck plates like a mechanical heartbeat. Liriana woke first. She did not move, afraid that even the slightest shift in weight would shatter the fragile reality of the moment. She lay curled against Jace's chest, the rough wool of the blanket pulled up to her chin. The heavy, rhythmic sound of his breathing was the most peaceful thing she had heard in weeks, more soothing than the crystal chimes of the Aurelian meditation gardens, more grounding than the hum of the royal engines. She tilted her head back slightly to look at him. In sleep, the lines of tension around his eyes had smoothed out. The cynicism that usually curled his lip was gone, replaced by a slack, boyish vulnerability. He looked younger, less like a weapon forged by a war he hated and more like the man he might have been if the universe had been kinder. Liriana felt a pang of guilt sharp enough to cut. This was stolen time. She was a princess of the Aurelian Empire, a biological key to a treaty that would determine the fate of billions. He was a human mechanic with grease under his fingernails and a price on his head because of her. Their worlds were not just separate, they were opposed, held apart by gravity, politics, and history. And yet, lying here, the skin of her arm pressed against his, the connection felt elemental. Her bioluminescence, usually responsive to her turbulent emotions, had settled into a steady, soft, golden pulse, matching the rhythm of his heart. Jace stirred. He drew in a sharp breath, his body tensing instinctively as he woke, before he registered the weight against his side. He opened his eyes, blinking against the morning light. When he looked down and saw her watching him, a flush of color rose up his neck, visible even through the stubble on his jaw. "Morning," he croaked, his voice thick with sleep. "Good morning," Liriana whispered. Jace shifted awkwardly, trying to create a polite distance without actually letting go of her. He cleared his throat. "My arm is asleep. I think you cut off the circulation to my entire left side." Liriana smiled, a small, shy expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You make a lot of noise when you sleep, human. It sounds like a hyperdrive with a cracked manifold." "It is a tactical defense mechanism," Jace countered, rubbing his face with his free hand. "Scares away predators." He sat up, swinging his legs over the edge of the cot. The air in the workshop was cold, and the sudden absence of his warmth made Liriana shiver. She sat up too, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy, loaded with the questions they were both terrified to ask. Was that real? What happens when I walk out that door? Can we ever do this again? Jace stood up and walked to the small kitchenette unit in the corner, busying himself with the coffee fabricator. He needed to do something with his hands. He felt exposed, his defenses stripped away by 6 hours of sleep and 1 night of honesty. "So," Jace said, his back to her. "Coffee? It is synthetic, tastes like burnt copper, but it wakes you up." "I would like that," Liriana said. She watched him work. "Jace, about last night." "Liriana," Jace started, turning around with 2 steaming mugs. "Look, we don't have to—" Before he could finish the sentence, the workshop was plunged into a wash of crimson light. The emergency holoscreen mounted above the workbench flared to life, overriding the standby mode with a jarring, dissonant chime. A robotic voice, stripped of all inflection, filled the small room. "Priority alert. Sector-wide lockdown in effect. Security forces are sweeping levels 8 through 12. Jace froze, the mugs halfway to Liriana. They both turned to the screen. A grainy image of Jace's face rotated in the center of the display. It was an old ID photo, likely from his discharge papers, making him look hard-eyed and dangerous. Next to it was a blurred image of Liriana in her technician's disguise from the market security cameras. Suspect identified as Jace Rydell, human male, 35, wanted for the abduction of Her Royal Highness, Princess Liriana. Suspect is considered armed and unstable. Citizens are advised to report all sightings immediately. "Abduction?" Liriana gasped, standing up so quickly the blanket fell to the floor. "They think you took me?" Jace slammed the mugs down on the workbench, coffee sloshing over the rim. "Of course they do. It is the perfect narrative. The damaged veteran snaps and kidnaps the alien princess. It neatly explains why you are missing without admitting that their security failed or that you ran away." He moved to the console, his fingers flying over the keys. "They are tracking the biosignature. If they are sweeping this sector." A heavy thud echoed from the corridor outside the blast door. Then another. The sound of magnetic boots locking onto the deck. "They are here," Jace said, his voice dropping to a calm, professional flatline. He grabbed Liriana by the shoulders, spinning her to face him. His eyes were intense, burning with a desperate urgency. "Listen to me. When they come through that door, you need to be the victim." "What?" Liriana shook her head. "No." "Yes," Jace hissed, his grip tightening. "Tell them I drugged you. Tell them I threatened you with a weapon. Tell them you were terrified the whole time." "I will not lie," Liriana said, her markings flaring with indignant white light. "You saved my life. If you tell them that, they will execute me for treason and they will strip you of your title," Jace said. "If you claim you were a willing participant, the treaty collapses. The Iron Dawn wins. You have to distance yourself from me. Liriana, it is the only way you walk out of here with the power to stop the war." "I do not care about the power," Liriana cried. "You have to," Jace shouted back. The blast door hissed. Sparks showered from the locking mechanism as a plasma cutter chewed through the bolts. Jace stepped back, raising his hands in the air. He looked at her one last time, his eyes pleading. "Please, be the princess, not the girl." The door exploded inward. Smoke billowed into the workshop, followed instantly by the whine of repulsor engines. 2 heavy combat drones floated into the room, their targeting lasers painting red dots on Jace's chest. Behind them, a squad of station security officers in riot gear stormed in, weapons raised. "On the ground!" a voice bellowed. Jace dropped to his knees, interlacing his fingers behind his head. He did not look at Liriana. Through the haze of smoke, a figure walked in. He moved with a serpentine grace, his robes pristine despite the debris. It was Counselor Voren. Voren looked around the cluttered workshop with a sneer of distaste before his black eyes landed on Liriana. "Your Highness," Voren said, his voice smooth as oiled glass. "We have been worried sick." Liriana stepped forward, placing herself between Jace and the leveled weapons of the security team. She raised her chin, summoning every ounce of royal authority she possessed. Her glow turned a commanding, regal gold. "Stand down," she ordered, her voice ringing off the metal walls. "This man is not a criminal." Voren paused, raising a single hairless eyebrow. "He is an abductor, Highness. He will be dealt with. He is my protector," Liriana declared, her hands sweeping out to gesture at Jace. "We were attacked in the market. He saved me from assassins when your security failed. I came with him willingly. There was no abduction." The room went silent. The security officers glanced at each other, uncertain. If the princess was declaring him innocent, their orders were invalid. Jace looked up at her, his heart hammering against his ribs. She was ruining it. She was saving him, and she was ruining everything. Voren did not look surprised. He looked disappointed, like a teacher whose student had failed a simple exam. "Willingly?" Voren repeated softly. He took a small device from his robe, a holographic projector. "I feared you might be suffering from Stockholm Syndrome." "Your Highness," Voren said, "the trauma of the attack, it confuses the mind. But we have evidence of what truly transpired." He thumbed the device. A holographic projection flickered to life in the center of the room. It was footage from the night before, but it was wrong. It showed the interior of the workshop. It showed Jace and Liriana, but the angle was steep, taken from the corner of the ceiling. The audio had been stripped and replaced with a low, menacing hum. The footage had been selectively cut and sped up. It showed Jace grabbing Liriana's face, the moment he had tenderly cupped her cheek, but in the edit, it looked like he was seizing her jaw, forcing her to look at him. It showed him steering her toward the bed, but the gentle guidance was edited to look like a shove. It showed Liriana curling up on the bed, but the context of her exhaustion was gone. She just looked small, huddled, and terrified, while Jace loomed over her. It was a masterclass in manipulation. It turned a moment of love into a crime scene. Liriana stared at the hologram, horror draining the blood from her face. That is not what happened. You twisted it. It is what the galaxy will see, Voren whispered, stepping close to her so only she could hear. He leaned in, his voice a razor blade wrapped in silk. think carefully. Liriana, if you persist in this delusion that you were willing, I will release this footage to the public. I will frame it as a scandal, a sordid, illicit affair between the immaculate princess and a dirty human mechanic. The treaty will dissolve in disgust. Your family will be shamed. And this man, he will not just be arrested, he will be torn apart by the mob. Liriana trembled. She looked at Jace. He was staring at the footage, his jaw clenched so hard a muscle feathered in his cheek. He understood. Vorin held all the cards. Secure the prisoner, Vorin commanded aloud. Stepping back, two guards hauled Jace to his feet. One of them slammed the butt of a rifle into Jace's stomach. Jace doubled over, gasping, but he did not fight back. He looked at Liriana. His eyes were dark, communicating a silent message. Let me go. Save yourself. Liriana felt tears prick her eyes, hot and stinging. She wanted to scream, to blast Vorin against the wall with her mind, but she knew it would only doom Jace faster. She stood frozen, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Take her to the shuttle, Vorin said to his personal guard. The princess requires decontamination. The interrogation room on Earth Sector Station Gamma was white, blindingly, agonizingly white. There were no shadows, no corners, just a seamless curve of plasteel designed to disorient the occupant. Jace sat at a metal table, his hands cuffed to the surface with magnetic locks. He had been there for 4 hours. Across from him sat two men. One was Earth Intelligence, a man named Agent Sterling with a face like a crumpled paper bag. The other was an Aurelian observer, silent and masked. Let us go over it again, Sterling said, tapping a stylus on his datapad. You grabbed her in the market. You dragged her to the tunnels. I saved her, Jace said, his voice raspy. I told you. There were shooters, masks, energy weapons. We found no shooters. Sterling said, we found an explosion caused by a gas leak. And we found witnesses who saw you running with the princess. Witnesses can be bought, Jace snapped. Check the forensic residue at the blast site. Check the energy signatures. We did, Sterling said. Inconclusive. But we have the video. Mr. Rydell, we saw what you did to her in that room. Jace lunged forward, the cuffs clanking loudly against the table. I didn't do anything to her. She was scared. She was tired. Sterling leaned in. You are a radical, aren't you? Iron Dawn sympathizer. You wanted to disrupt the treaty by soiling the goods. Don't you call her that? Jace growled. She is not goods. She is the only person in this entire sector who actually gives a damn about peace. The Aurelian observer spoke for the first time. His voice filtered through a translator. The human speaks with unusual passion for his captive, the observer noted. Perhaps he is simply delusional. Sterling sighed. Look, Rydell, we know you were Special Forces and we know you have PTSD. Maybe you thought you were fighting the war again. Maybe you thought she was a target. Just confess to temporary insanity, and we can avoid a firing squad. I am not insane, Jace said, leaning back and closing his eyes. And I am not the one you should be looking at. He opened his eyes and looked at the datapad Sterling had left on the table. It was displaying a freeze frame of the gas leak explosion from the market security feed. Zoom in, Jace said. Sterling blinked. What? On the explosion. Frame 32. The flash. Sterling hesitated, then tapped the screen. The image expanded. The color, Jace said. Gas leaks burn orange and yellow. Look at the core of the blast. It was green, a sickly, vibrant emerald green. That is ionized plasma, Jace said. Military grade. And look at the debris pattern. It is directional, shaped charge. He looked at the Aurelian observer. That is an Aurelian breaching charge, standard issue for the Royal Guard. The observer stiffened. Impossible. Is it? Jace challenged. Why would human terrorists use Aurelian military tech? Unless they aren't human terrorists. Sterling frowned, looking at the image. He glanced at the observer, a flicker of suspicion crossing his face. Jace pressed the advantage. You are being played. Agent, we all are. The call is coming from inside the house. Liriana sat in the stateroom of the Aurelian cruiser Solaris. It was a room of breathtaking luxury, with walls of spun glass and carpets of woven light. But the door was locked from the outside. She was pacing, her ceremonial robes discarded on the floor. She was wearing a simple silk tunic, her movements agitated. Vorin had taken everything, her dignity, her voice, and Jace. She stopped at the main viewport, looking out at the stars. The station was a distant speck now. They were preparing for the jump to hyperspace, heading for the Aurelian capital. She closed her eyes and reached out with her mind. She could feel the ship, not the metal, but the minds of the crew. Hundreds of them. Boredom, duty, hunger, and beneath it all, the hum of the ship's data core. Liriana walked to the communications console. It was locked, requiring a biometric key she did not have, but she didn't need a key. She was a high princess of the blood. She could interface with crystalline technology directly. She placed her hands on the smooth surface of the console. She closed her eyes and pushed. Her mind slid into the network like water. It was disorienting at first, a rush of data streams and logic gates, but she found the flow and rode it. She bypassed the security protocols, sensing them as walls of static and slipping through the cracks. She hunted for Vorin's personal directory. She found it encrypted behind a heavy psychic wall. She hammered against it, pouring her anger into the strike. The wall shattered. Files spilled open in her mind's eye. She saw the schematics for the treaty signing hall on Aurelian Prime. She saw the seating arrangements, and she saw the weapon. Operation Dawnfall. It wasn't a bomb. It was a kinetic strike, a hidden railgun positioned in the ventilation spire above the podium. The target list scrolled past. Target primary, Earth Prime Minister. Target secondary, collateral damage. Then she saw the contingency file. Subject, Princess Liriana. Status, compromised. Action, replacement. She opened the file. It was a profile of her cousin, Ilara, who was young, pliable, and known for her obedience to Vorin. The plan was stark in its cruelty. They would assassinate the Earth Prime Minister during the signing. In the chaos, Liriana would be declared unfit due to her trauma and her scandalous abduction, sequestered in a mental ward and replaced by Ilara. The Aurelian military would retaliate for the Earth attack, seizing the border worlds, war, manufactured and sold as justice. The door chime sounded. Liriana yanked her hands from the console, the connection severing with a snap that made her head reel. Enter, she said, her voice shaking slightly. The door slid open. Vorin stood there. He was smiling. I trust you are comfortable, Highness, he asked. Liriana turned to face him. She did not bow. She did not smile. I know what Dawnfall is. Vorin, she said. Vorin stopped. The smile didn't leave his face, but it changed. It became predatory. You have been poking around the data core, he noted. Talented. I always said your telepathy was stronger than your mother's. A pity you wasted on sympathy for primitives. You are going to murder the Prime Minister, Liriana said, her voice rising. You are going to start a war that will kill millions. Why? Because peace is a slow death. Because peace. Vorin snapped, his composure cracking for the first time. Look at us, Liriana. We are the oldest civilization in the quadrant. We shaped the stars while humans were still banging rocks together. And now, We bow to them? We share trade routes? We dilute our culture with their filth? He walked toward her, his eyes blazing. The Iron Dawn understands what you do not. Strength must be demonstrated. The galaxy must be reminded of who holds the leash. You are insane, Liriana whispered. I am a patriot, Vorin corrected. And you? You are a disappointment. He turned to the door. We jump in 10 minutes. Enjoy the view. Princess, it will be the last time you see the stars as a free woman. When we land, you will be escorted to your chambers until the ceremony. And then, well, Ilara has always wanted a crown. The door slid shut, locking with a heavy thud. Liriana stood trembling. She was alone. She had no allies on the ship. The crew obeyed Vorin. She looked at the console. Vorin had locked it down from the outside. She could feel the hard seal on the data stream. She couldn't hack it again. But the transmission array... She remembered something Jace had told her in the workshop, late at night when the darkness made secrets easier to share. He had talked about his unit, about how they communicated when the main comms were jammed. We used burst transmissions, he had said, short, high-frequency pulses hidden inside static, code 44 Delta. The receivers ignored it as background noise, but if you knew what to listen for... Liriana placed her hand on the wall panel, focusing not on the computer but on the ship's external antenna. She reached out with her mind, feeling the vibration of the transmitter. She didn't know the technical frequency. She had to feel for it. She recalled the sound of Jace's voice, the rhythm of the code. She pushed a thought into the array. Jace, Dawnfall is a trap. Capital City. They are going to kill everyone. She wrapped the thought in the static pattern he had described. She poured her fear and her love into it, using her bioluminescence as a capacitor to boost the signal. Help me. She felt the burst leave the ship, a microscopic needle of sound in the vast haystack of the void. Then the feedback hit her. The ship's automated dampeners slammed down on her mind. She cried out, collapsing to the floor as the world went black. In the holding cell on Earth Station, Jace was staring at his lunch. It was a tray of gray nutrient paste and a cup of lukewarm water. The guard, a bored corporal named Miller, was leaning against the wall outside the energy barrier, picking his teeth. Hey, Miller, Jace called out. What do you want, traitor? Miller grunted. I think there is a rat in my paste, Jace said calmly. Miller rolled his eyes. There are no rats on a space station. Rydell, eat your slop. I am serious, Jace said. Look, it is moving. He poked the paste. It did not move. At that moment, a small, circular cleaning bot buzzed into the corridor. It was an older model, bumping against the walls as it scrubbed the floor. Jace watched it. He knew that model, the Mark IV scrubber. It had a known defect in its navigation sensor loop. If you introduced a magnetic anomaly near its base, it panicked and vented its cleaning solution as a defense mechanism. Jace looked at the metal spoon on his tray. He looked at the magnetic cuffs on his wrists. Miller, seriously, Jace said. If I get food poisoning, it is a lot of paperwork for you. Miller sighed, swiped his keycard, and lowered the energy barrier. He stepped inside, baton raised. If this is a trick, I am going to... As Miller leaned over the tray, Jace moved. He didn't attack the guard. He dropped his metal spoon onto the floor, directly in the path of the incoming cleaning bot. The bot rolled over the spoon. The metal disturbed its magnetic sensor. The bot shrieked. Error. Obstruction detected. Initiating purge. A cloud of pressurized, soapy chemical foam erupted from the bot, blasting Miller directly in the face. Miller screamed, blinded, flailing his arms. Jace was already moving. He grabbed the heavy plastic lunch tray and swung it like a discus. The edge of the tray connected with Miller's temple with a hollow thwack. Miller went down like a sack of potatoes. Jace caught the guard's keycard before it hit the floor. "Sorry." "Miller," Jace muttered. "I will write you a commendation for bravery." He unlocked his cuffs, rubbing his wrists. Stupid space cuffs. He grumbled, "Never hold a charge properly." He stripped Miller of his comms unit and his sidearm, a stunner. He didn't want to kill anyone. He just wanted out. Jace slipped into the corridor, moving low and fast. He accessed the guard's comms. "Alert. Unauthorized transmission detected on wideband. Origin Aurelian cruiser." Jace stopped. He tuned the frequency. He knew that static. It was the 44th drop troop rhythm. He listened. Amidst the hiss and pop of cosmic radiation, he heard a voice. It wasn't audio, it was a data packet converted to sound. But to his ears, trained by years of war, it was clear as a bell. "Jace, Dawnfall is a trap. Capital City." She remembered. Jace grinned. A feral, dangerous baring of teeth. He needed a ship. Level 14 was the Shadow Port, the place where ships docked that didn't want to be scanned. Jace kicked open the door to a smoky backroom office. A Tellarite named Cax jumped, dropping a glass of blue liquor. "Jace!" Cax squealed. "You are on every screen in the sector. Are you insane coming here? I need a ship." "Cax," Jace said, holstering the stunner. "I do not have ships. I have salvage. I need something fast, something with a jump drive that doesn't ask for permission." Cax stared at him. "You are going after her, aren't you?" "The princess." Jace walked to the desk and grabbed a bottle of water, downing it in one go. "She is walking into an execution, Cax, and she is the only thing stopping the fleet from turning Earth into a charcoal briquette." Cax sighed, his tusks twitching. "There is a freighter in Bay 6, the Rusty Starling. The captain is drunk in a brothel on level 2. The nav computer is wiped, and the hyperdrive leaks. Does it fly?" "Mostly. Good enough." Jace grabbed a data chip from Cax's desk. "Download the Aurelian flight paths." "You are going to get vaporized," Cax warned, his fingers dancing over his console to comply. "That is enemy space." "Jace, it is not enemy space," Jace said, taking the chip. "It is just space." He turned to leave, but paused. He reached into his pocket. His fingers brushed against a small, hard object. It was a fragment of Liriana's ceremonial armor, a small crystalline clasp that had fallen off when he helped her undress in the maintenance closet. It still held a faint charge, glowing with a soft, pulsing violet light. He squeezed it in his fist. "I am coming. Your radiance," he whispered. Jace ran toward Bay 6. The alarms of the station began to wail in earnest now, but he didn't look back. He vaulted into the cockpit of the Rusty Starling, the smell of stale air and old cargo greeting him like an old friend. He punched the ignition. The engines coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life. Jace grabbed the yoke. He didn't ask for clearance. He gunned the thrusters, blowing the docking clamps and tearing the freighter free from the station's grip. As the ship banked away from Earth, turning its nose toward the shimmering, deadly void of Aurelian space, Jace Rydell, ex-soldier, mechanic, and traitor to two worlds, pushed the throttle to the stops. "Hang on, Liriana," he said to the empty cockpit. "I am going to crash this wedding." The stars stretched into lines of white fire as the jump drive engaged, and the Rusty Starling vanished into the dark. The transition from the violent tunnel of hyperspace to real space was usually a nausea-inducing lurch. But entering the Aurelian system felt like crashing into a painting. The Rusty Starling shuddered, its bolts groaning in protest as the star lines snapped back into points of light. Through the scratched transparasteel of the cockpit, Jace Rydell saw it. Aurelian Prime. It was not just a planet. It was a statement. The world was a sphere of violet and azure, wrapped in 3 distinct planetary rings made not of dust, but of massive suspended crystal shards that caught the light of the binary suns and refracted it into a constant, shifting aurora. Shimmering energy fields, the legendary planetary shields, rippled across the atmosphere like a silk veil breathing in the solar wind. Jace gripped the yoke, his knuckles white. He looked down at his grease-stained hands, then out at the terrifying perfection of the alien homeworld. He felt like a cockroach crawling across a diamond. "We are clear of the jump point," a voice crackled over the secure channel. Sitting in the co-pilot seat was Nyx, a Tellarite smuggler with a penchant for high-risk gambling and a snout that twitched when she was nervous. She was twitching now. She had boarded at the sector fringe, a favor called in from Jace's old war network. "Do not stare at the scenery." "Jace," Nyx grunted, her fingers flying over the sensor scrambler. "We have 3 patrol cruisers on an intercept vector. Inputting the forged diplomatic codes now. Pray your Aurelian is better than your piloting." Jace held his breath. The sensor board lit up with angry red pings. The Aurelian cruisers were sleek, teardrop-shaped vessels that moved with the silence of predators. If the codes failed, the rusty starling would be vaporized before Jace could even blink. Authentication pending. The ship's computer droned. Jace thought of the workshop. He thought of the way Liriana's breath had hitched when he touched her face. Authentication accepted. Welcome home, Ambassador. Nyx let out a long, wheezing breath. "We are in. Take us down to the lower logistical district. And Jace, try not to crash into anything expensive. Everything down there costs more than this entire ship." The Palace of the Dawn was less a building and more a geography. It grew out of the side of a crystal mountain, a cascading series of spires and floating platforms connected by bridges of hard light. Princess Liriana stood at the window of her suite, her hands pressed against the cold, transparent surface. From here, she could see the mirror lake stretching out to the horizon, reflecting the binary sunset in shades of gold and blood. It was a view that poets across the galaxy wept over. Liriana hated it. The suite was vast, filled with furniture carved from singing wood and drapes of woven starlight. But it was a cage. The air was too clean, filtered of all the chaotic, messy scents of life she had briefly tasted on Gatefall Station. She turned away from the window. The room was crowded, though not with people. Handmaidens, slender, silent Aurelians with skin like polished pearl, flitted around her, adjusting the hem of a gown that weighed as much as a suit of combat armor. "Leave us," a voice commanded. The handmaidens bowed low and vanished like smoke. Counselor Vorin stepped out from the shadows of an archway. He was wearing formal court robes of deep indigo, stiff with embroidery that depicted the history of the Empire. "You look radiant, Highness," Vorin said, though his eyes were cold. "The people will weep to see you." "I am not doing this for the people," Liriana said, her voice dull. "I am doing it because you threatened to destroy a man's life." Vorin smiled, a thin stretching of his lips. "I merely pointed out the consequences of your indiscretion. The galaxy needs a symbol. Liriana, it needs the Virgin Princess, the Dove of Peace, uniting with the Warlord Prince. It does not need a confused girl who ran off to play house with a human mechanic in a grease pit." Liriana flinched. The memory of the workshop, the smell of oil, the warmth of the cot, the safety of Jace's arms flashed through her mind. Vorin made it sound dirty. To her, it was the only holy thing she had left. "You will attend the ball tonight," Vorin continued, circling her. You will dance with Prince Draven, you will smile. And when the time comes to sign the treaty tomorrow, you will stand where you are told. If you deviate, even by a millimeter, I will release the footage. And you're human. He will be hunted down and flayed by the mobs on both sides of the border. Liriana's bioluminescence flared a sharp, angry red before she forced it back to a submissive pale blue. I understand, she whispered. Good, Vorin said, reaching out to adjust a diamond pin in her hair. She stiffened at his touch. Remember who you are, Princess. You are the Empire, and the Empire does not make mistakes. He left her alone in the silence of her golden room. Liriana looked at her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back was beautiful, terrifying, and utterly hollow. She touched the spot on her chest where her heart beat, the same rhythm that had once synchronized with Jace's. He is safe, she told herself. He is far away. He is safe. Jace was currently trying to figure out how to sit on a chair that hovered. He had infiltrated the capital city, Aurelian Prime, 2 hours ago. The city was a sensory overload of light and sound. The buildings were grown from crystal, humming with a low-level sonic resonance that made his teeth ache. The streets were paved with a translucent material that glowed softly underfoot. He was disguised as a junior logistical liaison for the Earth delegation, wearing a stiff, ill-fitting gray uniform Nyx had procured. He was sitting, or trying to sit, in the waiting room of the Ministry of Protocol, waiting for a contact. The chair, a teardrop of floating metal, drifted to the left every time he shifted his weight. Stop moving, Jace muttered to himself, gripping the edges of the seat. A passing Aurelian dignitary gave him a look of profound confusion. Jace attempted to bow, as he had seen in the briefing vids, but he bent too low, nearly headbutting a floating planter. Greetings, Jace said, forcing a smile. Lovely weather, very shiny. The dignitary hurried away. Jace sighed and leaned back, accidentally bumping his elbow against a glowing blue panel on the wall. Immediately, the panel turned red and emitted a sharp, scolding buzz. A holographic text appeared in the air. Warning, do not touch royal water vines. Penalty, public shaming. Jace snatched his arm back. Great, he whispered. I am going to cause a diplomatic incident because of a plant. Mr. Rydell. Jace looked up. A young Aurelian male was standing there. He was shorter than the average citizen, his markings a soft, eager green. He held a data pad like a shield. I am Elian, the young alien said, his voice hushed. Third assistant to the Deputy of Sanitation. You are the contact? Jace asked, standing up and relieved to be off the floating chair. Elian nodded, looking around nervously. My cousin works in the docking bay. He said you were the human who was with Her Highness. Jace stiffened. Keep your voice down. Elian stepped closer, his eyes wide. Is it true? Did you really show her how to eat street food? Jace blinked. That is what you heard? Elian nodded enthusiastically. It is the talk of the servants' quarters. The princess, eating peasant food. It is so rebellious. I have read all about humans. Your culture is fascinating. You have chaos. You have noise. You have rock and roll. Jace couldn't help it. A small grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. Yeah. Kid, we have rock and roll. Elian looked at him with pure hero worship. I can get you into the ball. I manage the waste disposal schedules for the event. Nobody looks at the sanitation crew, and nobody checks the service corridors. Jace clapped a hand on the kid's shoulder. Elian, you are my new favorite alien. The grand ballroom of the palace was a cavern of light. The ceiling was a projection of the galaxy itself, stars swirling in real time. The floor was a lake of polished obsidian. Thousands of dignitaries from 100 worlds filled the space, a kaleidoscope of silks, armors, and ceremonial robes. Music, generated by vibrating crystals, filled the air, a complex, multi-layered harmony that sounded like wind moving through glass. Jace stood in the shadows of a massive pillar near the service entrance. He was wearing a stolen Aurelian formal suit, a high-collared tunic of midnight blue velvet that was tight in the shoulders and itched like crazy. He tugged at the collar, scanning the room. Drones hovered everywhere, cameras live-streaming the event to the entire Alliance. Then, the music swelled to a crescendo. The massive doors at the top of the grand staircase dissolved into mist. Princess Liriana appeared. The room gasped. She was wearing a gown made of living light fibers that shifted color with her movement, from deep violet to blinding white. The fabric clung to her frame like water. Her hair was woven with diamonds that floated under their own anti-gravity field. She looked like a goddess. She looked untouchable. Jace felt a physical ache in his chest. She was 1,000,000 miles away, standing at the peak of an empire he had spent 10 years fighting. At the bottom of the stairs, a man waited, Prince Draven of the Iron Clans. He was huge, broad-shouldered, wearing armor of black matte metal. He was not the monster Jace had pictured. He had a stern, weary face, marked by scars similar to Jace's own. He looked like a man who knew the weight of a rifle. He did not look cruel, but he looked distant, like a statue carved from granite. Liriana descended the stairs. Every step was perfect. Every movement was a lie. She reached the bottom. Prince Draven bowed, offering his hand. "My princess," Draven said, his voice deep and rumbling. "My prince," Liriana replied. The music shifted into a waltz, or the alien equivalent. Draven led her onto the obsidian floor. They began to dance, a complex series of glides and turns. Jace watched, his heart hammering. He shouldn't be here. This was insane, but he couldn't look away. As they spun, Liriana's gaze swept the crowd. She was looking for threats, for Voron, for an exit. Her eyes were wide, panicked, searching. Then, she saw him. It was impossible. The room was filled with thousands of people, but her eyes locked onto the shadows behind the pillar. She saw the blue velvet suit. She saw the scar on the temple. She saw the human who looked like he wanted to punch the prince. Liriana missed a step. It was a tiny thing. Her foot caught on the hem of her light gown. She stumbled, just for a fraction of a second. Draven caught her instantly, his grip firm, righting her before she could fall. But the room saw it. A ripple of whispers went through the crowd like a wind. The perfect princess had faltered. "Are you unwell?" Draven asked quietly, still moving her through the steps. Then Liriana was not looking at him. She was staring at the pillar, her heart beating so hard she thought it would crack her ribs. "No," she whispered. I saw a ghost." The dance ended. The crowd applauded, a polite, thunderous sound. Liriana excused herself, citing the need for air. Voron watched her go, his eyes narrowing, but he was surrounded by Earth diplomats and could not follow immediately. Liriana fled to the balcony of the moons. It was a secluded garden suspended over the city, lit only by floating orbs of soft amber light. The air here was thin and cold. She gripped the railing, gasping for breath. She closed her eyes, telling herself she had imagined it. "You know." Jace's voice came from the shadows. "That suit costs more than my entire ship, and it still fits me like a burlap sack." Liriana spun around. Jace stepped out from behind a hedge of singing ferns. He looked uncomfortable, terrified, and absolutely wonderful. Liriana stared at him for a long second, her brain refusing to process the reality of his presence. Then, the dam broke. "You idiot," she hissed, marching toward him. "You absolute reckless, suicidal idiot." She shoved him in the chest. It wasn't a hard shove, but it had all her fear behind it. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "Vorin will kill you. The guards will kill you. I thought you were safe." Jace caught her hands. "I was safe. It was boring." "How did you even get in?" Liriana cried, tears spilling over. "This is the most secure fortress in the galaxy." "I made a friend in sanitation," Jace said, a lopsided grin appearing on his face. "And I have a very motivated pilot." Liriana pulled her hands away, pacing the small balcony. Her light gown swirled around her like a storm cloud. "You cannot be here. Jace, you have to leave. Now." "No," Jace said. He stepped in her path, stopping her. "I am not leaving you to handle this alone. I saw the news. I saw what Vorin did with the footage. He framed you." Liriana sobbed. "He made it look like you forced me." "I know," Jace said gently. "And now he is going to make me marry Draven, and he is going to kill the Prime Minister, and I don't know what to do." Jace grabbed her shoulders. "Hey, look at me." Liriana looked up. Her eyes were swimming with tears, her bioluminescence flickering in chaotic patterns of violet and gray. "We are going to fix it," Jace said. "How?" she asked. "We are two people against an empire." Jace shrugged. "I have taken worse odds. Once in the Antioch campaign, I took a hill with 3 guys and a broken radio." Liriana let out a wet, choked laugh. "This is not a hill, Jace. This is a planet." "Same principle," Jace said. "Just more stairs." He looked at her, really looked at her. Beneath the diamonds and the light gown, she was the same girl who had curled up on his cot in the workshop. The anger in her eyes faded, replaced by a raw, aching longing. "You came back," she whispered. "Yeah," Jace said, his voice rough. "I realized I forgot to charge you for the engine repair." Liriana laughed again, a real sound this time. She threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in the velvet of his stolen suit. Jace wrapped his arms around her waist, holding her tight, lifting her slightly off the ground. For a moment, there was no conspiracy, no war, just the two of them, holding on for dear life on a balcony at the edge of the world. "If a security drone sees us," Liriana mumbled into his shoulder, "we are going to be vaporized." "Worth it," Jace said, resting his cheek against her hair. He pulled back slightly, keeping his hands on her waist. "Okay, your Radiance. Here's the situation. I decrypted the data from the assassin's spike. We know the plan. Operation Dawnfall," Liriana said, wiping her eyes. "Right. It is not just an assassination. It is a setup. They have a weapon hidden in the signing hall." "I know," Liriana said. "I saw it in the ship's logs. A kinetic railgun, hidden in the ventilation spire above the podium. It is aimed at the Earth delegation. They are going to fire it during the ceremony," Jace said. "And because it is using Aurelian tech, it will look like an inside job, or worse, a human sabotage attempt gone wrong. Vorin uses the chaos to seize power, blames the humans, and triggers the war. We have to stop the ceremony," Liriana said. "No," Jace said, his eyes hardening. "If we stop it, Vorin just tries again later. We need to end him. We need to expose him." "How?" "The drones," Jace said, pointing to the hovering cameras buzzing around the distant ballroom. "Vorin loves his propaganda. He is broadcasting the entire thing live to every screen in the Alliance." Liriana's eyes widened. She understood. "We give them a show." She said, "Exactly." Jace outlined the plan, his voice low and urgent. Tomorrow, during the signing, you go out there. You play the part. You smile. You stand on the mark. That sounds like Voron's plan, Liriana said doubtfully. Wait for it. While you are being the perfect princess, I am going to be in the ventilation spire. I am going to hack the weapon, but instead of disarming it, I am going to retarget it. And I am going to link the drone feed to the weapon's diagnostic log. I don't understand, Liriana said. The weapon has a voice recorder, Jace explained, for black box analysis. Voron will be on the command deck giving the order to fire, if I can patch that audio into the public broadcast. The galaxy hears him give the order, Liriana finished, her markings glowing brighter with realization. And they see the weapon fire harmlessly into the sky, Jace added. We prove the conspiracy, we save the diplomats, and we ruin Voron's career in one move. It is dangerous, Liriana said. If you are caught in the spire, I will be fine, Jace said. I am good at crawling in vents. Remember? Liriana looked at him. It was a desperate, terrifying plan. It relied on 1,000 variables going right. But looking at Jace's set jaw, she felt a surge of hope she hadn't felt in weeks. Okay, she said. We do it. One problem, Jace said. The weapon. It is psychically locked. Aurelian tech. I can hack the mechanicals, but I cannot override the trigger mechanism without a bio key. Liriana reached up and touched the crown of light hovering above her head. The crown, she said. It is linked to the planetary defense grid. It acts as the master key for all ceremonial weapons. She looked at Jace. I can link the crown to the weapon, but I have to be on the podium to do it. That means you are the target, Jace said, frowning. If I don't retarget that gun in time, then you better be fast, mechanic, Liriana said, a fierce smile touching her lips. Jace stared at her. God, you are terrifying. I love it. The sound of footsteps approaching the balcony door made them freeze. Someone is coming, Liriana whispered. Go, she urged, pushing him toward the trellis of vines that led down to the lower gardens. Get to the spire. I will keep Voron distracted. Jace climbed over the railing. He hung there for a second, looking back at her. Liriana? She leaned over the railing. Yes? Don't let the warlord step on your toes. Liriana laughed softly. Go! Jace dropped into the darkness, vanishing into the foliage below. Liriana turned back to the door just as Voron stepped onto the balcony. There you are, Voron said, his eyes scanning the empty garden suspiciously. You have been gone a long time. I needed air, Liriana said, her voice cool and composed. The prince is a vigorous dancer. Voron studied her face. She looked different. The panic was gone. In its place was a serenity that Voron mistook for submission, but which was actually the calm of a soldier before the charge. Come inside, Voron said. The toasts are beginning. Tomorrow is a big day. Yes, Liriana said, walking past him with her head held high. It certainly will be. As she re-entered the ballroom, the light of the galaxy swirling above her. Liriana touched the spot on her waist where Jace's hand had been. She was not a prisoner anymore. She was a conspirator. And tomorrow, the golden cage was going to break, high above the palace, in the cold wind of the upper atmosphere. Jace Rydell clung to the side of a crystal spire. He adjusted his grip, his fingers numb, and looked down at the glittering lights of the ball below. He pulled a small screwdriver from the pocket of his velvet suit. All right, Voron, Jace muttered into the wind. Let's see how you like it when the camera is pointing the other way. He began to climb. The twin suns of Aurelian Prime rose over the capital like hateful, burning eyes. They cast a hard, relentless light over the plaza of the Ascendants, a sprawling expanse of polished white stone capable of holding 2 million souls. Today, it was full. From the high vantage point of the palace spires, the crowd looked less like a gathering of individuals and more like a shifting, bioluminescent ocean. Legions of Aurelian citizens stood in concentric circles, their skin markings glowing in synchronized pulses of reverence, soft blues, deep indigos, and pious whites. Above them, the sky was choked with traffic, massive holographic banners draped from the clouds, projecting the entwined crests of the Aurelian Empire and the Galactic Alliance. 50 stories tall, it was a scene of cinematic perfection, a masterpiece of propaganda engineered to look like peace. Through the shimmering atmospheric shield, an Earth shuttle descended. It was an ugly, brutalist thing of gray carbon scoring and heavy armor, looking like a fist punching through a silk sheet. It was flanked by a dozen Aurelian interceptors, a visual metaphor that the news feeds would undoubtedly dissect for hours, the fragile humans being shepherded by their superior protectors. Inside the royal preparation chamber, the air was cold and smelled of ozone and crushed lilies. Princess Liriana stood on a pedestal in the center of the room, her arms held out to her sides. She was a statue being dressed for exhibition. Her handmaidens moved around her in silence, attaching the ceremonial armor piece by piece. This was not the combat armor of the field, but the raiment of the covenant. Plates of spun platinum and woven light fiber that were less about protection and more about binding her in tradition. The chest plate was secured with a magnetic lock that clicked shut with the finality of a prison door. Liriana flinched. "Still, Your Highness," a handmaiden whispered, securing a greave to Liriana's shin. "The cameras will see the tremor." Liriana closed her eyes. She could feel the vibration of the crowd outside, a low-frequency hum that rattled the bones of the palace. Her anxiety was a physical thing, a creature with claws tearing at the inside of her stomach. Her bioluminescence, usually a disciplined aura, was flickering rapidly, betraying her terror in staccato flashes of violet and gray. She reached up and touched the crown of unity floating just millimeters above her forehead. It was a halo of suspended crystal, powered by a direct neural interface. It didn't just sit on her head, it whispered to her. It connected her to the planetary defense grid, to the ceremonial drones, to the very heartbeat of the city. It was a symbol of power that felt like a leash. She lowered her hand, her fingers brushing against her collarbone. She pressed down on the spot where, just 2 nights ago, she had rested her head against a rough wool blanket and a grease-stained shirt. She closed her eyes tighter and summoned the memory. She recalled the smell of hydraulic fluid and stale coffee. She recalled the steady, rhythmic thrum of Jace's heart beneath her ear. Thump, 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 thump. It was a human sound, messy and vital, so different from the sterile hum of the crystals. "I am not a symbol," she thought, the mantra grounding her. "I am Liriana, and I am not alone." 50 meters beneath the stage, Jace Rydell was crawling through a conduit designed for wastewater recycling. He was sweating profusely. The stolen technician's jumpsuit was too tight across his shoulders, and the humid air of the tunnels was thick with the smell of sulfur. He checked the holographic schematic projected from his wrist, a stolen map provided by Elian, the sanitation official. "Left at the junction," Jace muttered to himself, wiping grime from his forehead, then up the service ladder to the substage platform. He reached the junction and swung left, his boots splashing in an inch of murky water. He moved with the focused, deadly intent of a man who had left fear behind 3 sectors ago. He was not a soldier anymore, following orders he hated. He was a mechanic fixing the biggest broken machine in the galaxy. He reached the ladder and climbed, emerging into a forest of hydraulic pistons and cooling vents. This was the underbelly of the great stage, the machinery required to make the magic happen above. And there, nestled between two massive anti-gravity generators, was the cancer. It was a shadowcaster cannon. Jace recognized the design from the war, though he had never seen one this small or this advanced. It was a sleek, matte black railgun, bolted to the floor and aimed upward at a 45-degree angle. Jace followed the trajectory with his eyes. It pointed directly through a decorative grate in the stage floor, aiming at the exact spot where the Earth Prime Minister would be standing. Jace scrambled over the piping and dropped down beside the weapon. He pulled his multi-tool from his belt and cracked the access panel. "Okay, let us see how you tick," Jace whispered. He bypassed the physical tamper locks with a magnetic shim. The panel slid open, revealing a nest of glowing optical crystals and fluid processors. Jace jacked his diagnostic tool into the port. Streams of data cascaded down his retinal display. He worked fast, his fingers flying. Target lock confirmed. Payload lethal plasma bolt. Trigger mechanism. Remote uplink. He started to isolate the firing circuit, intending to sever the connection to the power core. It should have been a simple sabotage job. Cut the power. Weapon dies. Vorin looks like an idiot when he pushes the button and nothing happens. Then he saw the secondary line. It was a purple data stream, pulsing in sync with a biological rhythm. Jace froze. He traced the line back through the code. It wasn't just a power coupling. It was a feedback loop. "Oh no," Jace breathed, the blood draining from his face. "You sick son of a bitch." The cannon was hardwired into the ceremonial network. Specifically, it was linked to the Crown of Unity. The weapon drew its targeting stability from the wearer's neural cortex to ensure perfect accuracy. But there was a trap. The feedback loop was bidirectional. If the weapon was tampered with abruptly, if the power was cut or the circuit smashed, the stored energy wouldn't just dissipate, it would surge back up the line, into the crown, into Liriana's brain. Jace stared at the readout. Feedback potential, 100% fatal. Cerebral liquefaction imminent. He couldn't disarm it. If he cut the wire, he killed her. If he did nothing, she watched the Prime Minister die and the war start. He had to change the target. He had to keep the circuit open, keep the energy flowing, but give it somewhere else to go. He looked up at the ceiling of the understructure. He looked at the massive conduits feeding the planetary shield generators, the crystal rings orbiting the planet. Jace began to rewire the targeting matrix, his hands shaking for the first time. He didn't just need to be a mechanic today. He needed to be a miracle worker. The door to the royal preparation chamber hissed open. Liriana did not turn around. She knew who it was by the drop in temperature in the room. "Leave us," Counselor Vorin commanded. The handmaidens hurried out, heads bowed, leaving Liriana alone with the architect of her misery. Vorin walked around her, inspecting her like a prize horse. He reached out and adjusted the angle of her shoulder plate. "Perfect," he murmured. "The galaxy is holding its breath for you, Liriana. Do not disappoint them." "I am ready," Liriana said, her voice flat. "Are you?" Vorin asked. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Because my security team has been scrubbing the deep net all morning. We found some distressing rumors, whispers of a mechanic, a human." Liriana's heart slammed against her ribs, but she kept her face like stone. Vorin smiled, a cruel, thin expression. "We know he is on the planet, Liriana. We know he came for you, and we know about your little sleepover in the workshop. He circled her, his robes rustling on the floor. Imagine the scandal, the virgin princess, soiled by a human grease monkey. If you step out of line today, if you hesitate, if you falter, I will not just kill the Prime Minister. I will release the unedited footage of your night together. I will paint you not as a victim, but as a traitor, a whore who sold her dignity for a human's touch. Liriana trembled. The shame he was trying to weaponize was a cold, heavy weight. She thought of Jace's laugh. She thought of the spicy food and the way he had looked at her, not as a princess, but as a person. She stopped trembling. Voren paused, sensing the shift. "You think that frightens me?" Liriana asked. Her voice was quiet, but it did not waver. "It should." Voren sneered. "You will be ruined. You will be a pariah." Liriana turned her head slowly to look him in the eye. Her bioluminescence flared, not with fear, but with a blinding, defiant gold. "Then let me be ruined," she said. Voren blinked, taken aback. "I would rather be remembered as a traitor who loved freely," Liriana said, her voice rising, "than as a perfect puppet who let you burn the world. My worth is not defined by your protocols, Voren, and it is certainly not defined by my obedience to a murderer." Voren stared at her, his composure cracking for a second. He sneered, recovering his mask. "Brave words," he spat. "Save them for the eulogy." He turned and marched to the door. "It is time." The sound of the crowd was a physical force as Liriana stepped out onto the grand balcony of the plaza. 2 million people roared, a sound that shook the very air. To her left, the Earth delegation stood in a tight, nervous knot. The Prime Minister looked small and gray next to the towering Aurelian guards. To her right, Prince Draven of the Iron Clan stood waiting at the altar of binding, his black armor absorbing the sunlight. Liriana walked forward. The crown of unity hummed on her head, heavy and loud. She could feel the data streams of the city flowing through her mind, the traffic patterns, the weather control, the security drones. She reached the altar. Draven nodded to her, a small, grim gesture of solidarity. He did not want this either. The high priest raised his staff, and silence fell over the plaza like a dropped curtain. Dozens of broadcast drones hovered in a semicircle around the altar, their lenses zooming in. Liriana knew that billions of people were watching. On Earth, in the bars of Gatefall, in the noble houses of Aurelian. She looked at the camera. She looked at the Prime Minister. She waited. "Where are you, Jace?" Suddenly, she felt it. It came through the neural interface of the crown, riding the carrier wave of the city's diagnostic network. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't a code. It was a rhythm. Thump, 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 thump. 3 rhythmic pulses, the heartbeat of a sleeping soldier. He was there. He was under her feet. The high priest intoned the ancient words, "And now, Her Highness will speak the vow of eternal bindings, sealing the fate of our worlds." Liriana stepped up to the microphone. The script Voren had written for her scrolled across her retinal display. "I, Liriana, submit myself to the will of the Empire." She looked at the scrolling text. She looked at Voren, who was standing in the VIP box, his hand hovering over a hidden console. Liriana took a breath. "I will not," she said. The words were amplified across the plaza. The silence that followed was absolute. Voren froze. The Prime Minister looked up, startled. Liriana looked directly into the primary drone lens. "There can be no peace built on a lie," she declared, her voice ringing with power. "The treaty you see today is a mask." Voren slammed his hand onto his comms unit. "Cut the feed. Cut the audio." In the control room, technicians scrambled, but their screens flashed with a stubborn locking code. A crude, pixelated image of a wrench appeared on the main broadcast monitor. The feed did not cut. Liriana continued, her voice gaining strength, her markings glowing so bright they were visible even in the daylight. We are being manipulated. The attacks on this treaty, the fear you feel, it is manufactured. The Iron Dawn is not a rebellion, it is a tool of the High Council. A gasp rippled through the crowd, starting low and building to a roar. Vorin is a traitor, Liriana shouted, pointing to the VIP box. He seeks to assassinate the Earth delegation to seize power for himself. Vorin's face twisted into a mask of pure rage. He looked at the scene unraveling, the crowd turning, the prince stepping back in shock, the cameras capturing his ruin. If she will not be silent, Vorin hissed, thumbing the safety off his remote trigger. Then I will silence her. He pressed the button. Under the stage, Jace saw the energy spike on his monitor. It went from 0 to critical in a microsecond. Here we go, Jace yelled to the empty room. The cannon hummed, a terrifying high-pitched whine that vibrated his teeth. The plasma charge built up in the chamber, a ball of condensed sun. Jace slammed the final bypass command into the console. He didn't try to stop the fire. He grabbed the targeting servo with both hands and physically wrenched the computerized aim, while his code rewrote the destination coordinates in the targeting computer. Not the Prime Minister. Jace gritted out, straining against the hydraulic resistance of the gun. Not today. He routed the firing solution into the atmospheric discharge array. The cannon fired. The world turned white. A beam of pure, coherent energy erupted from the stage floor, not at the Prime Minister, but straight up. It missed the Earth delegation by 3 meters, screaming past them with a roar like a tearing sky. The beam punched through the atmospheric shield and slammed into the crystalline rings orbiting the planet. The result was breathless, terrifying beauty. The crystal rings absorbed the energy and scattered it. The sky above the plaza exploded into an aurora of impossible colors, neon greens, violent violets, and burning golds, rippling outward like a celestial flower blooming in fast motion. The crowd screamed and cowered. On the stage, the backlash hit. Even though Jace had rerouted the main blast, the psychic feedback surged through the connection. Liriana screamed. The crown of unity flared with blinding light. The feedback loop slammed into her mind like a physical hammer. She arched her back, her entire body convulsing as the neural overload tore through her. Liriana! The shout came from the floor. A maintenance hatch in the center of the stage flew open with a clang. Jace Rydell burst out, covered in grease, sweat, and hydraulic fluid. He didn't look at the guards. He didn't look at the cameras. He saw only her. He sprinted across the stage as Liriana collapsed, her body limp, her markings flashing wildly in a seizure of distress. "Halt!" a royal guard shouted, leveling a spear. "Move and I will break you!" Jace roared, "not slowing down!" He slid on his knees to Liriana's side, scooping her up into his arms before she hit the stone. Her head lolled back, her eyes rolled up, the violet irises fading to gray. "Liriana, stay with me," Jace begged, tearing the crown of unity from her head and throwing it skittering across the stage. "Breathe. Come on, breathe." He cradled her head against his chest, rocking her, oblivious to the millions of eyes watching. Vorin, from his box, screamed into his comms, "Kill him! Kill the human!" He triggered the weapon. The royal guards hesitated. They looked at the sky, still burning with the aurora. They looked at the Prime Minister, unharmed. They looked at the human, who was not attacking but weeping over their princess. Prince Draven stepped forward. He drew a massive vibro sword from his back. The guards tensed. Draven walked up to Jace and Liriana. He looked down at the human holding his betrothed. He looked at the hole in the stage where the weapon had fired. He turned to the guards. "Stand down," Draven commanded, his voice booming like thunder. The human saved the delegation. The weapon was aimed at the Prime Minister. But Counselor Voran orders, a guard captain started. "Counselor Voran is a liar and a traitor," Draven bellowed. In the VIP box, Voran realized the game was over. He turned to flee, heading for the private lift. He ran straight into a wall of green skin. Elian, the third assistant to the Deputy of Sanitation, stood in the doorway. He was trembling, terrified, but he held a datapad high in the air. "I have the logs," Elian shouted, his voice cracking but audible to the nearby nobles. "I have the logs from the sanitation sublevels." Voran ordered the weapon installation. "It is all here." Voran drew a concealed blaster, but before he could fire, he was tackled. Not by guards, but by the angry mob of diplomats and junior officials who had swarmed the box. On the stage, the silence returned, heavy and thick. Jace brushed the hair from Liriana's face. She was pale, her skin cool to the touch. Her bioluminescence was dim, a fading ember. "Medics!" Jace screamed, his voice raw. "Get a medic up here now!" A team of Earth and Aurelian medical personnel rushed the stage, surrounding them. Jace refused to let go of her hand even as they slapped biomonitors onto her chest. The camera drone, hovering 5 feet away, captured the image that would define the next century of galactic history. It was not a picture of a treaty being signed. It was a picture of a human ex-soldier, on his knees in the center of the alien capital, holding the broken body of a princess, his face a mask of absolute devastating love. Beneath them, the caption on the news feeds changed from royal wedding to revolution. "Liriana?" Jace whispered, his forehead pressed against her hand. "Just one night, remember? You promised me a lifetime. You do not get to quit now." Her fingers twitched in his, faint and weak. The suns beat down. The aurora swirled above, and the fate of the Alliance hung in the balance of a single faltering heartbeat. The royal healing ward of the Palace of the Dawn was a place where silence had weight. The walls were formed from translucent amber-hued crystal that hummed with a restorative resonance, a sound so low it was felt in the marrow rather than heard by the ear. It was a place designed for the mending of gods and kings, sterile and beautiful and utterly terrifying to Jace Rydell. He sat in a chair that molded uncomfortably to his spine, his boots scuffed and stained with the grime of the ventilation shafts. Resting on a floor that cost more than the entire orbital station he called home. He had not slept in 30 hours. His eyes felt like they were filled with sand, and his left shoulder throbbed where a royal guard had clipped him with a baton during the chaos on the stage. But he did not move. His hand, rough and scarred, was wrapped around Liriana's fingers. She lay on a suspension bed, hovering a foot above the floor in a field of soft anti-gravity. She was pale. The vibrant violet of her skin faded to a chalky lavender. The bioluminescent markings that usually danced across her face were dim, pulsing with a slow, weak rhythm that barely registered in the low light. Every time a healer glided past, tall, serene beings in white robes, they cast a look of disdain at the humans slouching at the bedside of their princess. Jace ignored them. He had stared down charging vanguards and orbital bombardments. He could handle the sneers of a few doctors. On the far wall, a muted news feed played on a holographic loop. Jace watched it with half-lidded eyes. The galaxy was on fire, metaphorically speaking. The footage of Liriana's speech was playing on every channel. Jace watched the replay of her standing on the stage, the crown of unity gone, her voice ringing out against the corruption of her own court. My worth is not defined by flawless obedience. The pundits were screaming at each other. On the Earth channels, they were calling her a hero, a whistleblower who saved the Prime Minister. On the Aurelian conservative networks, they were calling her a traitor who had broken the sacred bonding ritual. But then, there were the leaks. The data Jace and Elian had released was spreading like a virus. Files showing Voron's communications with the Iron Dawn, financial transfers, the schematics of the weapon. The truth was muddying the waters of hatred, making it impossible for the hardliners to maintain their narrative. The door to the ward slid open with a hush. Jace tensed, his hand instinctively moving to the empty holster at his hip before he relaxed. It was Prince Draven. The warlord of the Iron Clans was not wearing his armor today. He wore a simple tunic of dark gray, his massive frame looking strangely human without the bulk of his plating. He walked with a limp, a reminder of some old war, and stopped at the foot of Liriana's bed. He looked at Liriana for a long moment, his expression unreadable, before his gaze shifted to Jace. "You are still here," Draven said. His voice was deep, like stones grinding together. "I am not leaving," Jace said, his voice raspy. "I did not expect you to," Draven replied. The prince pulled a floating stool closer and sat down. The two men, soldiers from opposing sides of a war that had defined their lives, sat in silence over the woman who had stopped it. "The council is in chaos," Draven said quietly. "Voron is in a holding cell, screaming about human contagion. Half the High Court wants to arrest you, the other half wants to give you a medal." "What do you want?" Jace asked. Draven looked at his hands. "I wanted peace. Human. That is all I have ever wanted. My people are tired. We have bled enough." He looked back at Liriana. "I never wanted this bond. A marriage built on a treaty is a cold bed. I respected her duty, but I did not know her heart." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "What she did yesterday, exposing the rot in our own house, it took more courage than any charge I have ever led. She saved the Alliance, and she saved me from a life of pretending." Draven stood up. He placed a hand on the railing of the bed. "When she wakes, tell her the Iron Clans stand with her. Tell her that if the High Court tries to strip her of her title, my fleet will park itself in orbit over the capital until they reconsider." Jace looked at him, surprised. "You would do that?" Draven offered a rare, grim smile. "She rejected me in front of 2 billion people. It was the most honest thing anyone has said to me in years. I will support whatever choice she makes, crown or not." He nodded to Jace. "Watch over her." "Soldier." Draven turned and walked out, leaving Jace alone with the hum of the crystals. It was another hour before the rhythm of the monitors changed. The slow, steady beep accelerated. The dim light of Liriana's markings flared, turning from gray to a soft, waking peach. "Liriana," Jace whispered, leaning forward, his heart hammering against his ribs. Her eyelids fluttered. She let out a soft groan, shifting on the suspension field, slowly, agonizingly. Her eyes opened. The violet irises were hazy, unfocused, but they swept the room, panic flickering in their depths until they landed on him. "Jace!" Her voice was a wreck, a dry whisper that cracked on the syllable. "I am here," Jace said, squeezing her hand. "I am right here." She tried to sit up, but Jace gently pushed her back down. "Easy. Your radiance," he said, forcing a smile. "You took a psychic feedback surge that would have fried a starship computer. Lie still." Liriana blinked, the memories flooding back. The speech, the weapon, the pain, the Prime Minister, she asked. Safe, Jace said. Back on Earth. Vorin, in jail, or whatever you call a dungeon with energy bars. Liriana let out a long breath, her body sinking back into the field. She looked at Jace, really looked at him. He was a mess. He had dark circles under his eyes, grease in his hair, and he smelled like stale sweat and antiseptic. He was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. You stayed, she whispered, wonder coloring her tone. Jace laughed, a short, self-deprecating sound. Yeah. Well, I had to make sure you didn't die before you paid my invoice. Liriana smiled weakly. Her fingers curled around his, weak but determined. We did it, she said. Yeah, Jace said, we did. The silence that followed was heavy, but not with tension. It was heavy with the realization of what came next. The adrenaline was gone. The crisis was over. Now, reality was crashing in. Jace pulled his hand away gently, sitting back in the chair. He looked at the floor, his jaw working. So, he started, his voice changing. It became the voice he used when he was talking to officers. Formal. Guarded. I heard the news, Jace said. The treaty is being renegotiated. They are scrapping the marriage clause. It is going to be a standard political alliance. Trade routes, non-aggression pacts, transparent. That is good, Liriana said, watching him carefully. It means you are off the hook, Jace said. No warlord husband. You are the hero of the hour. Your approval ratings are through the roof. He stood up, brushing his hands on his pants. Which means my job is done, Jace said. Liriana froze. What are you saying? I am saying you have an empire to fix, Liriana, and I have a freighter that is probably being impounded by Port Authority right now. He refused to meet her eyes. Look, it was a hell of a ride. Just one night, right? That was the deal. We got a few nights, actually, more than I ever expected. Jace, Liriana warned, her voice gaining a dangerous edge. You are a princess, Jace said, talking faster now, trying to outrun the pain in his chest. A real one. Not a figurehead anymore. You are going to be busy. You are going to have kings and diplomats lining up to court you. You don't need a mechanic hanging around, reminding everyone of the time you got kidnapped and ate street meat. He was doing it for her. She knew that. He was trying to be the noble sacrifice, to remove the stain on her reputation so she could rule effectively. It made her furious. Jace turned to the door. So, I am just going to go. Take care of yourself, your radiance. It was an honor. He took a step toward the exit. Stop. The command was not whispered. It was shouted, amplified by a sudden flare of telepathic force that rattled the crystal vials on the tray table. Jace stopped. He did not turn around. Liriana struggled to sit up, fighting the dizziness. She swung her legs over the edge of the suspension bed, her bare feet touching the cold floor. She stood, swaying slightly, clutching her hospital gown. You are a coward, Jace Rydell, she said. Jace turned then, his eyes blazing. A coward? I just took on an entire government for you, and now you are running away because you are afraid of the hard part, Liriana shouted back, tears stinging her eyes. I am trying to save your future, Jace yelled. Do you think they will ever accept us? A human and an Aurelian, a mechanic and a royal? They will eat you alive. Liriana, I am a liability. I do not care. Liriana crossed the room. She was weak, stumbling, but she moved with a ferocity that made Jace step back. You think just one night was a contract? She asked, her voice trembling. You think I said that because I wanted a fling? She stopped inches from him. looking up into his face. I said it because I was starving. Jace, I was starving for something real. I told myself that one night would be enough, that if I could just taste freedom once, I could go back to my cage and do my duty. She reached out and grabbed the front of his dirty jacket, pulling him down to her level. But I was lying, she whispered. One night was not enough. It was a torture, because it showed me what I was missing. Jace stared at her, his defenses crumbling brick by brick. I do not want just a night, Liriana said, the tears spilling over. I do not want a memory to keep me warm while I sit on a cold throne. I want to argue with you about breakfast. I want to hear you snore. I want you to fix things that I break. She leaned her forehead against his chest, her hands clutching him as if he were the only solid thing in a spinning universe. I want to stay in the human's arms forever, she sobbed. That is the only treaty I care about. Jace stood frozen. He felt her shaking against him. He felt the wetness of her tears soaking through his shirt. The walls he had built around his heart, the soldier's discipline, the mechanic's cynicism, the fear of not being enough, shattered. He wrapped his arms around her. He buried his face in her hair, breathing in the scent of her. It is going to be a disaster, Jace choked out. The papers will hate us. The nobles will plot against us. My old commanding officer will probably have a stroke. Let them, Liriana mumbled into his chest. I am not royalty. Liriana, I don't know how to bow. I eat with my hands. I have nightmares that make me scream. I will wake you up, she promised, and I will teach you to bow if you teach me how to fix a hyperdrive. Jace laughed, a wet, ragged sound. He pulled back just enough to look at her. Her markings were glowing a soft, steady gold, the color of sunrise. Forever is a long time, Jace said. You sure you are up for it? Liriana smiled, and it was the first smile Jace had seen that reached her eyes completely. Try me, she said. The weeks that followed were a blur of political reconstruction. The breakdown of the forced marriage treaty left a vacuum that needed to be filled, and Liriana filled it with a hurricane of reform. She did not abdicate. That would have been the easy way out. The romantic retreat into obscurity. Instead, she used her newfound capital, the moral authority of the woman who stopped a war, to rewrite the constitution of the Aurelian Empire. She sat in the High Council chamber, Jace standing silently at her side in a new suit that fit slightly better, and proposed the unthinkable, the Council of Voices. It was a restructuring of the monarchy. The crown would remain as a symbol of unity, but legislative power would be shared with elected representatives from the provinces, including the non-Aurelian districts. When the hardliners protested, claiming tradition, Liriana simply pointed to the empty seat where Vorin used to sit and asked if tradition was worth the price of treason. The motion passed. Then came the public address. The Plaza of the Ascendants was full again, but the atmosphere was different. The military barricades were gone. The mood was not one of synchronized reverence, but of chaotic, noisy curiosity. Liriana walked out onto the stage. She was not wearing the raiment of the Covenant. She was not wearing the crown of unity. She wore a simple gown of deep blue silk, elegant but functional. She walked to the podium, and then she stopped and looked back. Jace was standing in the wings, hidden in the shadows as protocol dictated. Liriana beckoned to him. Jace hesitated. He shook his head slightly. No, he mouthed. This is your moment. Liriana did not move. She just waited, her hand extended. The crowd murmured. Jace sighed, straightened his jacket, and walked out onto the stage. He stood a few steps behind her, visible to the world, a human, a soldier, a partner. Liriana turned to the microphone. Citizens of Aurelian and friends from Earth. She began. Her voice was clear, amplified without the aid of the psychic network. For 1,000 years, our leaders have stood here and pretended to be gods. We have hidden our faces behind masks of light and our hearts behind walls of duty. We told you that perfection was the only way to rule. She looked at Jace, then back to the crowd. We were wrong. She gripped the podium. Perfection is a lie. Real peace is messy. It is difficult. It requires us to look at our enemies and see their fear, not just their weapons. It requires us to admit when we are broken. She smiled, a genuine human expression. I stand before you not as a perfect vessel of the Empire, but as a woman who makes mistakes. A woman who fell in love with a human who is stubborn, infuriating, and quite frankly, terrible at Aurelian dancing. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. In the background, Jace snorted, shaking his head, his face turning a slight shade of pink. The camera drones caught it, broadcasting the moment of levity to a galaxy desperate for something to smile about. But, Liriana continued, her voice softening, he is also courageous. He is kind, and he taught me that honor is not about doing what you are told, but doing what is right, even when it costs you everything. She looked out at the sea of faces, Aurelian and human standing side by side. We are entering a new era, an era where we do not hide our scars, but learn from them. Let us build a peace that is real. The applause that followed was not the polite, rhythmic clapping of the court. It was a roar. It was chaotic, loud, and filled with whistles and cheers. It was the sound of a people waking up. The treaty was signed 3 hours later. It was done in a conference room, not a cathedral. There were no altars, no binding vows, just the Prime Minister of Earth and the newly appointed Council of Voices sitting around a table, arguing over tariffs and student exchange programs. Liriana sat at the head of the table, not as a bride, but as a moderator. Jace sat in the back, reading a datapad on orbital mechanics waiting for her. When the final digital signatures were affixed, there was no magical light show, just a handshake. The Prime Minister shook Liriana's hand. Thank you, Your Highness. Please, Liriana said. Call me Liriana. That evening, the Palace of the Dawn was quiet. The parties were raging in the city below, a celebration of relief that the sky hadn't fallen. But up in the royal quarters, the silence was welcome. Liriana and Jace walked through the balcony of the moons. The singing ferns were humming a soft, nocturnal melody. Above them, the sky was a masterpiece. The energy from the redirected cannon blast had permanently ionized the upper atmosphere of the rings. A band of shimmering, translucent color, teal and magenta, stretched across the night. A permanent aurora that turned the weapon's violence into a scar of breathtaking beauty. Jace leaned against the railing, looking up at it. You know, he said, I am going to have to explain this to the insurance company. Sorry. I used the planetary defense grid to paint the sky. Liriana laughed, leaning against him. I think we can write it off as a public art installation. She wrapped her arm through his. It felt easy now. The awkwardness was gone. They walked in silence for a moment. So, Jace said, I have been looking at the security protocols for the Royal Wing. Oh? Liriana asked. Yeah, they are tight. Biometric locks, retinal scanners, guard rotations, and I am trying to figure out how to convince your head of security that I need a permanent pass to your bedroom without him shooting me. Liriana smirked. I am the princess. Jace. I can just order him to let you in. Jace shook his head. No. That is cheating. I want to earn it. Maybe I can bribe him with those earth snacks. The spicy ones. Do not dare, Liriana said. You nearly killed me with those. They stopped at the end of the balcony, where the view opened up to the infinite spread of the galaxy. What happens now? Jace asked quietly. Liriana turned to him. She reached up and placed her hands on his shoulders. Her skin was glowing with a soft, contented light, the constellations on her cheeks steady and calm. We live, she said. We argue about politics. You teach me how to drive that rust bucket ship of yours. We try that pizza thing you told me about. Pizza is non-negotiable, Jace agreed. And we stay, Liriana whispered. She stood on her tiptoes. Jace leaned down. The kiss was not desperate like the one in the workshop, nor hurried like the one in the garden. It was slow. It was deliberate. It tasted of patience and promise. It was a kiss that said they had all the time in the universe. The final image was one of quiet intimacy, inside the royal chambers. The lights were dimmed to a warm amber glow. The massive bed, draped in silks of the deepest blue, overlooked the panoramic window and the new aurora burning in the sky. Jace lay on his back, one arm thrown over his eyes, the other wrapped around Liriana. She was curled against his side, her head resting on his chest, her legs tangled with his. It was a scene of profound ordinariness. There were no crowns, no weapons, no cameras, just a man and a woman, exhausted and victorious. Liriana traced a finger over the scar on Jace's chest. Her bioluminescent markings pulsed in a slow, rhythmic wave that traveled down her arm and onto his skin, casting a faint magical light over his human imperfections. She closed her eyes, listening to his heartbeat. It was the same rhythm that had saved her life. Thump, 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 the voiceover. Jace's voice, gruff, warm, and tinged with a newfound hope, echoed softly as the camera pulled back, framing the couple against the backdrop of the stars. They say history is written by the victors. But real history? That isn't written in books or treaties. It's written in the quiet choices we make when the world is burning. Sometimes, just one night is enough to change the course of the stars. But choosing to stay, day after messy day, that is how you build a future worth fighting for. Liriana shifted slightly, murmuring in her sleep, pulling the blanket tighter. Jace smiled in the dark, kissed the top of her glowing head, and closed his eyes.